You know, for authenticity's sake, I demanded they kill all the air conditioning in here. It is August, and we wanted to create the most accurate environment possible.
The arena experience.
Exactly, the true arena experience. We're in what I could legitimately call a wrestling church now, of the past, with one of the architects of what was preached here on a monthly basis to what probably should have been, gauging from building size, about 800 people, but often became 1,500 or 2,000. Tod Gordon, we're in the ECW Arena, the former ECW Arena, now 2300 Arena. Thank you.
Thank you.
You will be the first edition on the DVD holder's shelf as we're covering 92, 93, but this is actually the series finale because we jumped around years and we covered your history, or the history of what you began, with people like Shane Douglas and Sandman and New Jack, and it would not have happened without Tri-State Wrestling.
It's true.
Is this not a fact?
Absolutely a fact.
What was Tri-State Wrestling in 1992, if I could go back in the time machine?
Tri-State Wrestling was a promotion started by a guy by the name of Joel Goodhart, who did a weekly radio show on the All Sports Talk radio show here in Philadelphia. And being a wrestling fan, the fact there was a wrestling show on the radio, I was like, really? They're like legitimizing wrestling? And so found the show, started tuning in, listening, and he was running 4 mega shows a year at the Civic Center and occasionally spot shows in other areas. And I guess I started out, I contacted him and I said, you know, how can I get involved with this stuff? It sounds phenomenal. I love what you're doing. And I said, I think one of the first interactions I had with him, I said, I wanted to get someone in my store for a promotion, bring a wrestler in. He said, who do you have in mind? I said, Missy Hyatt. I mean,
everyone had Missy Hyatt on their mind in 1992.
1991, 1991 back
much
then.
Better
she
than
was smoking in that era. Right after she came out of the Texas territories and all.
Right.
Oh my God, she hadn't touched her face yet or any other part of her body, and she was blow away gorgeous. I mean, unbelievable. And so she came to my store, and I have a very refined store, by the way. It's a very nice jewelry store. It's a high-class establishment. And she walked there within minutes. She's laying across my counter in front of me. All the customers, we're on one side of the counter. The customers, and there she is laying. I said, "Oh my God!" I'm like all shy. Like she's sitting there. She's like, "Come on, baby." She was like, "Wow." She was the walking riot already, Missy Hyatt. And then I started doing some advertising with Joel. Then she became a silent partner. Gave him a little seed money because he was struggling, and he had literally zero business acumen. I mean, literally zero. And he started doing those Civic Center shows where he would bring in a mega load of talent.
Right.
Anybody who had a name anywhere that he marked out for as a kid, he'd bring in, which I understood the philosophy behind, but on a business level, maybe one guy too. You don't bring in 17, like anybody you can even think of, you know, that's what he did.
Who was his booker?
I assume he was his own booker. I guess he was his own booker. Although most of the talent he brought in of any name value, he would let them do their own finishes and their own booking.
Okay.
I mean, he wouldn't really book it because it was not an ongoing feud kind of deal.
It was one night.
It was just a one-night, you know, blow-off show kind of deal. And the Civic Center was a huge place to do shows like that. And he did pretty well there, but never was able to, you know, make the nut.
Now, you telling him, listen, here's your expense column, here's your prop. Do you see if we don't bring in all these wrestlers, we can shorten this column? Are you giving him that?
Yeah, of course I'm telling him that. He goes, you don't understand the business. I know what I need to draw. I said, okay. I said, you have to have Austin Idol and this one and really to draw? I mean, my God. I mean, when he tried the show when he just had Eddie Gilbert and Cactus Jack, which were 2 big names headlining and nobody else, and they worked 3 times in the same night, he outdrew every other show he did.
Right.
But meanwhile, the next show is Abdullah, this one, and then the Sheik, all names that I used. But at that point, we were on television. We were a much, you know, bigger, growing product.
Right. The city of Philadelphia, a wrestling city?
The city of Philadelphia is a very, very unique city. Yes, it is a wrestling city. We were probably the ones here that got the NWA when it was, as it was merging, becoming WCW, to start coming east all the time. They drew here, they never drew anywhere else. And here you couldn't bullshit anybody. I mean, the people in this city, it's one thing to say you can work them, and you can, in a wrestling persona, but you can't bullshit them.
Right.
You can't give them a product that they know is bullshit. They're not going to take any paddling and shove down their throat. I mean, they'll still go to the Eagles games when they're 2-14, but if they see somebody who's not trying out there, that's the guy they're after. The guys who are trying their hardest, no matter how much they suck, at least they're putting the effort. That they respect the effort. It's a nitty-gritty city in that regard. And in fact, I remember once being at the Civic Center, which we talked about for years when Shane Douglas came here. It was the Dynamic Dudes against Freebirds. Freebirds are the heels, Dudes are the baby faces. And this at that time, it just didn't happen. They booed every piece of offense that the Dudes got in. That had never happened before. Right. And they're in the ring, and you could see them like they were shaking. Like Shane was young, and Johnny Ace, I guess, was young, but they were shaking, and the Freebirds were just laughing. Yeah. They were like, "Oh my God!" Anything the Freebirds did, the place exploded. Any offense, and this is what they do now when they're trying to like piss on Roman Reigns or something. Right. But then it was the furthest thing from that had never been seen before. Right. And that's the kind of fan base we had here.
The heel town.
It was a heel town. But you could be a heel baby face, but you couldn't be a good-looking baby face. You couldn't be the matinee idol baby face. That would never fly in Philadelphia.
George Bush Sr. is in the White House. The Washington Redskins and Buffalo Bills are headed to Super Bowl 26. Black or White by Michael Jackson, the #1 song on the radio. Average American household income, $30,050. Gas was $1.05 a gallon. Cheaper than the 1981 show we just shot today. And our guest today is about to embark on the biggest year in his career. Came into '92 as the Intercontinental Champion and shocked the wrestling world by closing it out as the WWE Heavyweight Champion. And I thank you for agreeing to get in the time machine and take us with you.
Interesting journey.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Sometimes it's like psychotherapy. You know? This was, for many years, talked about as kind of a dream match. And why didn't the Hogan-Flair thing work?
Well, I think because probably the egos, in the sense that two guys both had. Hogan had a set routine way he worked. He could only work a certain way. Had to work the Hulk Hogan kind of way. And Ric Flair was just the same mentality. He was set in his own ways of how he had basically, both of them were two guys that had the same match every night so when you mix them together and say, okay, now try to mix and combine, they were at a loss as to how to do that.
Does a booker, a promoter, somebody, is it their job to pull the guys and say, listen, this isn't going to work unless one of you starts to dance to somebody's music?
I suspect, I'm guessing, but I'm sure Vince tried.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I'm thinking that I'm sure there was a lot of reasoning there. On, you know, I kind of went through my own thing with Rick in '92 when I worked with him, where it was, you know, for whatever reason we went from having really good matches to, like, as soon as I won the title, we were just having lousy matches where we bungled up the finish all the time, or something went wrong, or missed up the spots, or there was always some kind of where it just wasn't quite right all the time. And Rick was, however, he told me that he was having some problems at home or something like that, and he was distracted. And maybe that's the case, but I mean, I remember actually going to Vince and going, I think he's sabotaging the matches, trying to sabotage like we keep screwing up the finish and stuff like that. It's like we're doing the worst endings to our matches out of nowhere. I'm pinning him with like he'll call a small package out of a figure four, and I'll small package him, and he doesn't kick out. And it's like the worst ending of the match. It's so flat, and it's like hardly even a clap. And I'm looking at him like, you're killing me off every night.
And killing himself too, because you.
Well, he was leaving, going to WCW at that time. But I remember telling Vince, like, we had 90 days left with him, and I was working with him, and I said, I'm not sure if he's on the level with me, because he's ruining the match every night on purpose, or it seems to me. And then Vince and me talked about it more, and I think we had meetings with Rick in the building where Pat Patterson flew in, and we talked. And you know what? We did the same thing every night. He still screwed up lots of stuff, and we never quite did it my way. And eventually he left, and I think Vince talked to me a few weeks after, and he said, you know what? I think it's just the way he works. He didn't do it. There was not so much bad intentions, maybe, as just. That's just how he works. He can only do Ric Flair stuff. He can do the Ric Flair match. He's got to be in control of that Ric Flair match, and that's, you know, he calls it in there kind of thing, which is sort of that was how they worked in the 70s. You know, they call it in there, and everybody sort of imitated Harley Race and Dory Funk, and I think Flair. That's how he came from an era that was. I came on the dividing line of another era that was not quite like that anymore. We could still call it in the ring, but we were more advanced than that.
Why were they split? Was it just because Shawn was going to be sent off, or
I'm guessing on his ass kind of thing? It was probably time. You know, they were together a long time, and I think Shawn was tired of. It's my understanding, whether how true it is a matter of someone else would know better. But so I didn't really hang with Shawn and Marty. I was around them a lot, but I didn't ride with them. And you know, I think Shawn was tired of babysitting Marty, and he wanted some. In kind of much the same way I was with Jim Neidhart, I didn't go out and say it, and I didn't do anything to, you know, make it happen. You know, I kind of stayed loyal to Jim, because I love being around Jim, but at the same time when they hinted at, as they did for quite some time with me, that they were going to give me a singles push, I started to look forward to it in the sense that I didn't have to babysit anyone.
On the road.
On the road.
Yeah.
And with Jim, a lot of the time, you know, and it's not a knock, but it was like he was kind of a late night prowler. His night didn't start till about 2 in the morning. And it was awful hard to you had to kind of run with him to get him back and make sure he got back to the room and got on the plane the next day. So you had to kind of party with him and hang with him and do a lot of fun stuff and get yourself corrupted and have a great time with Jim the Anvil. But I mean, at the same time, when you're, you know, making mortgage payments and worrying about your kids and worrying about how much of your time you're not home and socking your money away and whatever, it's like you can't let somebody mess it all up for you. And I think, not that Jim did, because we got split off without ever sort of planning it. It just, they came to us and split us up.
But in Shawn and Marty's case, let me ask you, taking the partying and the babysitting out of the equation, if you had to put some money back then on who would have been the guy to do a singles run, where would your money have gone?
You know, I was a big fan of both of them, and I was always a big fan of Marty's, especially both of them were two different kind of workers, but they worked similar. I had a lot of respect for both of them, but I also think that it was clear to me that Shawn was an exceptional athlete. And I think between Shawn and Kurt Hennig, I can't think of two wrestlers that were better athletes than those two guys. And Shawn was a really gifted athlete, and it was time for him.
It's said that one's best gimmick or character should have a lot of them, the person in it. Was the Heartbreak Kid with Sherry, and was that kind of the perfect model vehicle for Shawn?
It's hard to say. When you look at Shawn and you sort of like a time capsule and you look at his whole career, I thought he was a pretty interesting character when he was working with me in say 97. More interesting than he was in 92. When I remember the Survivor Series match with Shawn, it was more of a guy that was almost confused about being where he was, and was a little bit like myself, was a little bit unsure that he had earned, that he was capable of being a single guy on his own, and he had a lot of doubts about his abilities and what kind of star power he really had. And by 97, he'd overcome a lot of that, and I'll take the Shawn in 97 work-wise as opposed to the one in 92.
Were you okay with the switch, A, and B, were you okay that it was Jacques?
No, I wasn't. I was okay with, it didn't matter to me who won it necessarily. I mean, I didn't have an issue with Jacques or anyone else that I can think of at the time. But I was a little bit concerned about where they were going with me when I thought I was doing pretty good. I thought I had some momentum going, and you know, what I'd done with Kurt, you know, the SummerSlam, and all. I was kind of riding a good wave. I thought I was sort of finally getting a chance to finally see what I could really do as a babyface. And when they hit me with that idea, I thought they pulled the rug out from underneath me, and that I was going to get sort of just pushed off to the sidelines. And
Really? You thought you were going to be discarded?
And that someone else would step in or something. I just didn't trust where it was going to end up. But at the same time, I could feel that like I trusted. Vince kind of I think pretty much told me what was going to go on. And yeah, I trusted what he was doing, but I just wasn't sure that it would really happen again. Like, he had promised me so many times that I just wasn't sure if it would really happen. But at the same time, I also knew that they sort of know what they're doing around here, so I'll just close my eyes and just pray for the best, you know.
How far in advance are you told?
I probably found out probably right around Christmas time or after, just after.
Rumor has it you were talking to WCW.
Yeah, it's true. I was talking to WCW. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I thought I better have some kind of a backup plan of something if I'm getting, you know, because usually when you had the title, you got recycled to the sidelines, and then you got sort of pushed out. If you look at Tito and a lot of guys, they just they kind of use you up and think, okay, now we're going a different direction, and whether that's a good direction or not, sometimes you don't have any say in it, and it doesn't matter. It's just you better have a backup plan. So I'm trying to remember how that came about, because I had a couple of dealings with WCW, but I think it was with Pillman, Brian Pillman. It came to me, and he told me that I think he told me that he could get me a better deal, that he had a better deal with WCW than what I was making in WWE, and that he could get me the same deal. And so I didn't really want to go anywhere, but I had it as a backup plan. And as I recall, it came down to calling them up and getting an idea of what they were going to do with me, or whether they're going to pay me that amount. And when I did, it was Jim Barnett who I called on the phone. And Jim Barnett basically told me that they couldn't pay me because I had talked to I think Ric Flair, and he basically told me they couldn't pay me what I'd been sort of promised or told that they could pay me, and that I was better off staying where I was.
Wow.
And it was kind of blunt and kind of like, and I always thought, well, maybe he was just trying to, you know, maybe he just didn't have much regard for me. I kind of, and then I always wonder if maybe he's just doing me the biggest favor in the world, you know. But I never, so I kind of took it, and that was it. And I was disappointed in that dealing, that because I only kind of explored it. And I remember when I had talked to somebody there, I think it was Kevin Sullivan I'd called, and he actually answered the phone, I think, at WCW. And he couldn't believe it was me on the phone. And it was like, but anyway, the worst thing about it was, like, after I kind of explored and turned it down, the thought of going down there. I think now that I remember, it might have been because I found out that my contract didn't roll over until September. Like I couldn't actually get out of my contract. I'd have to take a lot of time off.
Right. And so your WWE had you tied up till September?
Yeah, it had me tied up, and I couldn't. And I think I had to wait, and so I kind of had to, shelve that thought, or dump it. And what bothered me the most was that it was all in the shit sheets and the observers and whatever all the next day. And I remember we actually had a confidentiality thing, and I remember I said, that's it with those guys. They're just not reliable. I should have stuck with that conviction.
Did he make a good champion for the WWE's identity of a heavyweight champion at the time?
It depends on how you look at it, I mean, I'm kind of baffled when people tell me that they think Ric Flair was the greatest wrestler of all time. Even though I'm a big fan of Rick's, and I know he had a real hard work ethic. I mean, I was not convinced ever that he was the greatest wrestler or as great as people thought he was.
Well, let's explore that. Why do people think he's the greatest, Jim? What are the reasons you hear?
Because he was a flamboyant character.
Charisma,
and he was. But as far as working in the ring, I found him, I wouldn't say ancient, but kind of a whole different mindset to what my generation was all about. He was locked into the 70s and couldn't break out of that.
In your personal philosophy, give me a percentage that you would weight one's charisma, work on the stick, look, kind of the stuff not related to in-ring work, versus what percentage should be what the guy does between the ropes.
Well, the way I always summarize it like this is like, there's 3 categories to being a great wrestler, and if you got 10 points in each category, one category is your look, how you look, and your presence when you walk in the room, when you walk out to the ring. Whether you're King Kong Bundy or you're Andre the Giant or you're Hulk Hogan, there's a certain look that when you walk and you see him, you go, wow. And there's lots of wrestlers that have all kinds of warrior, it takes a lot to have a great look. Some wrestlers just could be their size or what they're, what they've been blessed with is from growing up or whatever. But I mean, the next category is your actually workability, whether you can actually wrestle. And if you got 10 points in that category, out of 10, how do you rate? And the other category would be your promos and how well you can sell yourself, your ability to sell yourself as this commodity that you're trying to sell. And you take all 3 of them and you mix them together, and where you fit in the wrestling world, I would base it on that ratio is how do you size up out of 30, And I'd say like Hulk Hogan was a 9 out of 10 promo, 9 out of 10 look, 1 out of 10 wrestler, And you look at Dynamite Kid, he was a 0 out of 10 promo, but he was a 9 out of 10 wrestler, and he had a 7 or 8 out of 10 look, And even in my own case, I think that probably my weakest area was my promos. I was probably maybe in my best days I was maybe a 7 or 8 or 6, 7, 8 or somewhere in there with the promos. I could do well when I had a good issue to talk about, like in '97. My look, I wasn't 6'4", I wasn't 6'8", I didn't have 25-inch pythons, and I didn't have, I wasn't 8 feet tall. And I'm your basic wrestler. I was 6 feet tall. I was 235 pounds. I was 235 pounds when I started, and I was 235 pounds when I was champion. I would say I was, 7 or 8 out of 10 on my look. I had a decent look, and the pink and the black was kind of cool, and the sunglasses, and it was different than Hogan and anyone else. There wasn't a lot of Bret Harts that came down the pike before I came along. So I was original, and so then it's like how good was my wrestling ability. And I think in that category, I was as close to being a 10 out of 10 as you. I made very few mistakes in the ring.
And maybe it also depended a little bit on what decade you worked in as to which of those 3 columns was weighted more than another? So, you know, if you see a Billy Graham or even a Hogan in the early 80s.
Yeah, well, it depends on what kind of fan you are. I mean, as a fan, you know, I was impressed by good bodies. You know, there was lots of good bodies that came through my dad's territory, including Billy Graham. But I wasn't about the bodies as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I was about the workers.
Okay.
You give me a Harley Race over a Billy Graham any day. Like, I wanted my wrestling to be real. I wanted it to look real. I wanted it, and I liked them to be, you know, I liked them to look like athletes and, you know, sell themselves like athletes. And that was always inclined, what worked well with bodybuilding, because they were muscle guys, because they looked like athletes and stuff, and they were impressive guys. And it was, I watched a lot of big guys lift weights and stuff, and was really impressed by them. But I mean, to me, I was always more fascinated with the guys that could do the really intricate moves. I'd rather watch Billy Robinson than Hulk Hogan.
Gotcha. How was Flair's and Vince's relationship in this short time?
Well, you know what, I think there was a lot of hopes pinned on Rick. And again, I might be wrong, because I was kind of just clawing to get up into that top echelon. And there was a big shift, and within a matter of time, I was in that top sort of echelon of knowing what's all going on, and you're on the top and you can look down. But in those days, I was still just about there. But what was going on with Rick is, I think it was just the tough job of having to fill Hogan's shoes. And that scandal rocked everything. I mean, the steroids were a dirty word in the world and everywhere, in the media and everywhere. So it's like wrestlers had been tainted with that Hogan rush and steroids, and how none of us were athletes, we were all blah, 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 blah. And it really affected everything, and business really tapered off. And Rick got thrown the football, and no one can ever take away from Rick that he didn't work hard. He worked hard every night. He would give you everything. He'd give you his heart and soul out there, and he'd come back drenched in sweat. And, you know, but I think the matches were lacking. They were, you know, for a lot of us wrestlers and fans included, I think it was like, it's the same old show. We've seen all this stuff before.
But not aware of any strain between Vince and Rick?
No, but I do remember later on, skipping ahead to I think it was probably right not long after SummerSlam. It was a TV taping, and we did a Saturday Night Main Event, I think, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I do remember, because it was a Saturday Night Main Event, that there was quite a lot of you know, counseling with Vince and closed-door sessions with Vince and Randy and Rick working out their match and getting it all set. And anyway, I just remember whatever. I think I was on the same Main Event. I might have worked with Papa Shango or somebody, but I worked with somebody, and I just remember when Rick and Randy went out, when they came back through the curtain after the match, Vince went ballistic on both of them and told them that they had to go right back out and do the whole entire match over again the way he told them to do it, and that he was furious. And they both walked right out. They started the match over again, and they had the whole intros again, and they did the whole match over again. And I can just remember Vince throwing his headset down when they came back through the second time, and he's like, fuck it, just get out of here. You know, they did this exact same match that they did 10 minutes before, and they didn't do any of the stuff apparently that Vince had specifically told him to do. And I think that was the death knell for Rick. That was when they went, this guy can't do what we need him to do, and we need someone that can. And how they picked me, I'm not sure.
You said you're talking to him and you're trying to lend a little business acumen to someone who didn't have any. Do you realize that it's over here?
Oh, I realized that it was over because all of a sudden he wasn't returning calls that last 2 weeks. He didn't show up. I guess he did show up for the radio show, but when I did speak to him, I said, you know, you're not going to be able to. You know, the money to bring these people in. I'm not giving you more. And my investment is where it is. That's where I'm. You know, that's where I'm leaving it at. But how are you going to do the show? You got to give people their money back. He said, don't quit till the last minute. Still, you don't know people can walk out. I said, Joel, you don't have the money to pay the wrestlers. You don't have the money to pay, you give the guy. And he didn't, and he disappeared. And it really left this bitter taste in the fans' mouths here,
right,
who really had supported him. I mean, they really, they cared about what he was trying to do there. And around here, like I said, when you show the effort, you care, they're with you.
Yeah.
They just said, hey, don't worry about it. They'll pay for just one show. We'll give you extra. Just let's keep this thing alive. Let's keep it going.
But you can't fuck them.
Yeah, but don't fuck them. Just don't take their money and walk away, and then disappear, not take a phone call.
Right.
Which is basically what he did. And he, I guess he felt shame, or he was disappointed that it didn't go over and it was a failure. But sometimes you got to man up and say, listen, I tried.
Right.
And they'll respect you for trying.
Right.
But don't just put your tail between your legs and run away. That was the worst mistake he made. After he went out of business and left, I got a phone call from Bob Ortiz. Bob Ortiz was the ring announcer. Everybody knows Bob Ortiz. He's just one of those guys you just gotta love. Greatest guy in the world. And he said, can I come talk to you and a couple of guys? I said, what about it? He goes, can I just talk to you? I said, okay, come to my office. After work one day, he showed up with Larry Winters and a guy by the name of Stevie Wonderful, who was a sound man. Larry was a wrestler. Bob was a ring announcer for Joel. Comes in, they said, we would really did not see this die. Joel was running these bar shows. Let's keep it going. We can do this. If we all gather together, we can do it, but we can't get a license. No one's going to afford a license. You have to have something of value to put up as a bond in order to get your license as a promoter.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a house. Well, I wasn't going to put up, I wasn't losing the house. I mean, it's just to say, in order to get the license, you had to have some kind of a bond.
No, I know, the collateral.
Well, it was like $1,000. It wasn't even an expensive bond. It was like $1,000 bond or something. Wow. That's all it took. And they couldn't come up with that. So I said, I got a business here. Oh, come on, it's once a month. We're doing this at Mike Schmidt Sports Bar. We got all the things ready. We got the wrestlers. We got the sound. We got all the stuff. We just didn't know where to put the show on. We just don't help us put the show on. I said, nah. Went back home, talked to my wife. Kids were too little to talk to them about it. Wrestled with, no pun intended. Said, oh, what the hell? What's the worst going to happen after a show or two? So we did. We went and talked to Mike Schmidt Sports Bar people, and they took me right in, and they said, yeah, we'd love to have you here on Tuesday nights, or I think it was Tuesday nights. It was a dead night for us, and then we do a weekly show there. And all right, let's give it a shot, see what happens. Or it's bi-weekly, I think it was weekly. And we're going to start a new promotion. And we need a new name. Tri-State was Joel's name. And what he was going for, I think, at least what I was thought when I came up with Eastern was, yeah, I want to do it like in this area. I want to keep, I'm not going to start traveling around the world to do little bar shows. They're going to lose our asses. So how about we just start here, then we expand like to Jersey, we expand to New York, and Delaware, little by, piece by piece, inch by inch. That's a business model for me. And we started running Schmidt's first night. I go and talk to the guy at the sports bar. He goes, by the way, yes, absolutely, I want to do this on one condition. What's that? Sandman can't work ever at this bar. Now, I don't even hardly know Sandman.
Right.
But I said, what do you mean he can't work at this bar? He goes, he's banned. He was banned from Mike Schmidt's sports bar? What the hell did he do? Oh, he spit it on a waitress, spit his beer out of her. I said, you got to be kidding me. So now, of course, all the guys are getting all excited. Oh, we're going to start up again. Tod Gordon, we run this thing. And DC Drake and Larry Winters and whoever. Bum, bum, bum. And Sam was like, decent. Who am I working? I go, yeah, you're not on the show. He goes, what do you mean you're not on the show? He goes, Gordon, you got to get me on the show. Sam, man. I was just meeting the guy. I didn't know him a little bit from Joel's shows, but I didn't really have much interaction with him. Just that we had the same birthday. Who found out? Anyway, I go back and talk to the guy. Listen, how about I get him to come in and apologize to this waitress? Try to use a little sense. I go up, dude, you're gonna come in there, you're gonna kiss this lady's ass, or I can't use you. It's your call. Do it. Yeah. So of course he came in there. He's a worker, and he came in there and kissed. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't was thinking. I get brain dead sometimes. I'll be a different person. So on the second show, I think it was that we brought him in, or third, one of the second or third.
If this isn't a message from God, to you right off the bat that before you even promote your first show, you've got Sandman banned in your only venue, and you didn't pay attention to it. I want to ask you what your point of differentiation was from the product you were about to put out from what its previous incarnation was. Did you give any thought to the fact that I've got to separate the bad taste in the mouth?
Not at the beginning, because the bad taste in the mouth wasn't over the product. The bad taste in the mouth was over the way it ended. People liked the idea. I mean, at that point, all wrestling was so child-oriented and so cartoonish and so, to me, garbagey. It was almost unwatchable. It was one of the reasons I wanted to have my own promotion, to say, hey, even if there's only 12 of us, let's do it the right way. Because I know when Joel was doing the shows, it was Hot Body and Stetson, they had their feud going on, and they were using chairs, and Larry Winters was falling off of balconies in Temple's McGonigal Hall. That was something nobody else was doing anywhere.
Right.
Down in Memphis, maybe a little bit, but no one up here was seeing Memphis television. If you got a magazine or after mag, you can read about somebody in a trash can and see a picture of the Moondogs, bleeding. And you're like, oh wow, where's that? I don't see any of that. It's just the blue moon of maybe Bruno bleeds on TV.
Right.
That's it. I mean, so I wanted to keep along that vein, never thinking about where it goes from there. That's all just the very beginning stages. The first stages, I just think was like, yeah, I want to keep that kind of a hard-hitting, believable. That's the word. Because that's the word to follow the thread all the way through ECW.
Believability.
Believable. Because they were really hitting the hell out of each other. I mean, yeah, it's a work, but they were, it's not the kind of work like you see these guys doing this. They were cracking each other. The work may have been the finish, but they wanted to show they were tough guys. They're from South Philly. They're right around the corner from here. From this Sandman. These guys are who they were. And he was still wearing a surfer's outfit back then. We hadn't quite gotten into the gimmick part, which we'll talk about later. But that was the difference, that we wanted to keep that same idea of believability.
Did it bother you to hear the head of your company say that?
No, it didn't. I trusted. I think by that time I was a loyal sort of soldier, and I kind of respected a lot of Vince's decisions, even though maybe the Bret Hart from, say, 1984, I'm going to question a lot of that, but by 1992, I'd been there long enough. It's been 8 years of watching Vince make so many brilliant sort of decisions that after a while, it's like kind of like, for lack of a better example, it's like being a German soldier with Hitler. Like, you see him win so many, he looks so smart and like a genius in the beginning that it's like, it's hard not to follow in line and go, hey, I'm going to follow this guy to, you'd be sorry later. But
did you talk to your dad about it?
No, well, maybe. I don't think my dad had a problem with it either. I really don't know that anybody did. I don't know of any wrestlers making a big issue of it. I think it was kind of questionable, like, wow, I wouldn't have thought that would happen. But as far as being concerned about it, I wasn't concerned about it.
Was the extent of his drug problems in '92 known to the locker room?
Well, I think it was known to everybody before he even came in. I mean, everyone knew he had problems on that level. I'm trying to think. I don't remember seeing him out of it in the WWF days. I really don't. He was more careful about it, if he was. There were certainly a lot of guys that were as messed up as you can get in those days. But Kerry, I don't know. Everyone, I think, Kerry was a hard guy not to like. I think everybody liked him, and I think there was just a sort of a sympathy for everybody had for him for just what he'd gone through, and I guess those of us that were around him might have seen him pilled up and stuff like that, but I don't recall seeing him pilled up, and I recall most of the time Kerry being a really loving, kind of giving kind of guy. He was probably one of the sweetest, kindest hearted wrestlers that you'll ever know. He was when I think of Kerry Von Erich, there's a guy that would get on his hands and knees and sit with some little kid that had cancer for 2 hours and talk to him about his, he was a really a good guy.
Mm-hmm. Do you call what's behind the firing?
I think he missed a shot. He was teamed up with Owen, I think, then.
Yes. I think the reason given is...
Was it High Energy, or what were they called?
New Foundation.
New Foundation.
Unprofessional conduct is the reason given.
Yeah, I think Jim messed up somewhere in I think the night before, as I remember, I think Jim was in Nassau or somewhere, and Jim, for whatever reasons, couldn't take the drug test or refused or stalled out until he snuck out of the back or whatever it was. He didn't end up taking the drug test. And his ass was grass the next day. He showed up at the TV tapings, as I recall. I think I was on my way to the town. But I know that Jim, I think, showed up at the building and Vince fired him. And I think the reason he fired him was because of his conduct the night before, and that all came from Chief Jay Strongbow. And so when Jim was leaving the dressing room, he was all upset, and he'd been terminated, and it was done. It was all sort of over, and he had walked past, I think, somewhere and saw Chief Jay Strongbow, and he picked up one of those TV monitors and shot-putted it across the hallway, and I think the chief ducked, and it hit some WWE TV exec, right? I think it broke his ankle or broke his foot, or I think it was he broke his foot, broke it, and but anyway, that was Jim's final goodbye, which is why when you see Wrestling with Shadows, and Jim says, I don't know if it's in the video, but maybe it was in my book, but at the very end of that, after I knocked Vince out, all that stuff, and I remember Jim said something, and everyone was real quiet, and Jim goes, well, at least I didn't break any monitors. At least I didn't throw any monitors, and everyone burst out laughing in the dressing room. But yeah, that's how Jim exited. When
Owen is freed from Jim, is there discussion of putting you with him?
No. No, it wasn't anything. I was finally getting the real push.
Right.
And even if it made some sense, which it didn't, it wasn't the right thing for me to do at that time.
Right.
I certainly wasn't going to go back into tags. It was just the kind of thing that would just ruin my life. It was not time for me to do that. There was another time for that to happen, maybe.
Was this the right time to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I think Undertaker, I always thought, had a pretty good gauge on what he needed to do next, when it was time to change his look, when it was time to, I've always respected and admired how he's kind of evolved. It wasn't an easy gimmick to pull off, and I remember when Undertaker worked with me the very first time, and I worked with him a couple of times when I was Intercontinental Champion and things like that, and we had that Hitman versus Frankenstein kind of match, and he was easy to work with and fun to work with, and but when I became champion, I remember when they finally said, "Okay, you're working with Undertaker," and I was thinking like, he was always fun to work with, but it's like I don't know how to work. The Hitman champion wrestler, kind of the gimmick I got now, was not really going to pull off this Frankenstein stuff very well as I'll do my best kind of thing, but I'm not quite sure how far to go with it. And I remember it was Undertaker that came to me and said, "I'm so happy, I'm so excited that I'm actually getting to work with you." And I was kind of surprised that he was so excited about working with me. He goes, "I can finally show everybody that I can work, that I can really wrestle, I can actually do stuff, and you can." And I think the great matches that I had with Undertaker were more of I think he had more to do with him than I did, in the sense that he knew how to make me bring out the wrestling, which is what he really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And we had such good matches. I mean, I can't, you know, as far as actually working with somebody, I don't know of any of the wrestlers I ever worked with that were as fun and smooth to work with as Undertaker. He was a total pro.
In the hands of a lesser man, a gimmick like that could be really one of the laughable ones in history.
I don't know anybody else that could have pulled it off. He had to be, he was the gimmick. He was the Undertaker. There's always a bit of the real character in the real wrestler. And in Undertaker's case, I know he wasn't Frankenstein. He wasn't a goth, or, you know, he wasn't into a lot of that stuff that he, but he, I know, right, must have been right from the first day that Vince brought him in and they talked about it, and sort of the foreseeing where he was going to go with it and what he had in mind. I applaud Undertaker. He did a great job of masterminding that gimmick. He did a great job.
Take me into the venue. Is it adequately equipped?
It's about the size of where we are right now. This little
just the stage.
Just the stage we're on. I mean, it was so small. First of all, you couldn't go off the top rope because you would hit your head on the ceiling. Right. And that was with a ring that we kept low to the ground. There was no like regular height to it. Right. And you still couldn't jump off the top rope. There was maybe 2 rows that you could get around the ring, and then there was just the sparse seats at the bar, in the regular bar area. It did not hold a lot.
How did you draw? How did you mark it? Did you like flyer bomb? Like what?
Basically we did a little flyering, and we put the word out. I guess to people. There was a mailing list, I guess, of some sort they had that Bob Ortiz had. It needs to do with Joel, and they had a hotline. They got X amount of calls, per week. And so then we could announce we're coming back, and word filters around here. If you're a wrestling fan, you mean another fan, what's going on? Oh, did you hear they're starting a new promotion? No. When? And it's a word of mouth kind of thing, too. And that's how we started, but it wasn't that many mouths. We were only drawing, 80 people. We're lucky.
Are you putting the cards together, doing the booking?
Yes. Okay. The first show I did not. The first show I let Larry Winters do the booking, and he swerved me, and it pissed me off. They wanted to do an angle where they were going to paint J.T. Smith white. I know, whatever. And I said, you can't do that. And this wasn't even a politically incorrect thing. It's just, I said, it's wrong. Right. I said, now, if you want to paint his partner black while you're painting him white, okay, now you got a balance there. At least it doesn't seem so offensive, because there's nothing, you're not getting back at JT by doing that, but now you're humiliating the team. It's a tag team match. It was, I think, Winters and Stetson, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, sure enough, they get out there, and didn't they forget the black paint?
Shucks.
Yeah.
One of those things.
Welcome to wrestling, Todd. It's okay. No problem. Next show, I goes, here's what I have in mind. I said, you know what, Larry? This is what I have in mind. You can work on the show, but you ain't book another show for me. Right. We talk.
I remember the black paint. You don't.
No, it was a week ago. That night I was telling him, that's it. I was furious.
Oh, I got you.
Because I have fans who were like, what kind of bullshit? What was that, Todd? What was that? And I said, you're right. What was I going to say? He didn't listen to me? I said, you're right. I had to suck it up. The buck stops here.
Everybody makes their debut for ECW on this show, because this is the first ECW show. So I'm going to throw out the entire card, match by match. I want just your impressions of the workers, of the match. Maybe you don't even remember who I'm talking about.
I will not remember most of this. This weekend, Larry put this first show together.
You opened with Jimmy Jannetty and Stevie Richards. Take both of them.
They were both guys who had worked for Joel. I mean, just about everybody in this group was part of Joel's school. He had a wrestling school. And they were all the students: J.T. Smith, the Sandman, C.N. Red, names I can't even pull out, and Donnie Allen, Hotbody, Stetson. They were all Joel's from his school. They were teaching there, or they were the students there. And again, he put that first card together, so I couldn't tell you much impression I had of anything that night. I was still trying to figure out who was taking the ticket money, knew where the sound was going to come from, where the...
Well, take Stevie Richards anyway. I mean, he's someone that you continue to work with, so there's
Stevie
obviously
Richards
something there.
ended up from that day where I barely knew him and didn't have much to say to him at all. And as time went on, and I watched him more and more, the kid had something. He definitely had something. I'll never forget, there was our first TV taping, maybe? No, taping a pilot, maybe. It was a Tabor Youth Center, and they did a Battle Royal. And Hot Body and Stetson, and back then, poor Stevie, he was so thin. I mean, he was like a bone with skin on it. I mean, he really was thin. Tall, long, the Shawn Michaels hair, very, very thin. And they took him and they just kept putting him in the headlock, and they chopped him unmercifully. I mean, like sadistically. I mean, this wasn't like for TV. Right? They just didn't like him, I guess.
Right.
Kid never said a word. Didn't cry, didn't moan, didn't come back and say, "What kind of boy?" No, we start screaming in the back dressing room. I said, "Wow, I admire that. I really did. I didn't admire what they did because they weren't giving him a receipt for anything.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't like that. They thought he was a pretty boy, whatever the case may be." And he didn't say a word, but I knew that he had something. And he also, as he developed, he ended up becoming a pretty damn good wrestler. I mean, as he filled out, he got bigger and smarter, and he got more into the business. And to this day, Steve's one of my best friends. I love Stevie. Kid's great. He's just got something that, had he not had all those throat operations, I think he would have been a big star in the WWE.
Glenn Osborne and Crybaby Waldo.
These are all Joel leftovers. It was like, to be honest with you, Glenn Osborne, they're all nice guys. Crybaby Waldo was just a big, heavy-set guy who was doing a gimmick, which is, I guess, a rip-off of the Crybaby Cannon. Yep. And no originality to it. Neither one of them could work. Or Glenn could work a little bit. But, yeah, these guys anybody who didn't stay on as we grew and grew, there was a reason for that.
Super Destroyer number 1.
A.J. Petruzzi.
A.J. Petruzzi, a long-time
Terrific
WWF
guy.
jobber, and Michael Bruno worked this match.
Michael Bruno was one of the hitmen with Tony Stetson and Joe's
Correct.
group, and he did not last with us. More than a show or two, I don't think.
Match 4, Hitman Tony Stetson and Ivan Koloff, who was brought in here. Is this your name for the night, it looks like,
Yeah,
perhaps?
what I decided
Yes.
to do is I said to you, I forgot about this for a second, but yeah, like I said to you, what Joel's downfall was that he wanted to have every star in the world
Right.
on there. And I knew that no budget's going to be able to do that. We're drawing 80 people like I am, or he was. You can't do that. So I had to pick a name. You know, Ivan was just relatively off TV from WCW, or NWA, I guess it was. And he was a drive, so he wasn't on a flight. And I called him up, how much we just need to come in. Everybody said it's like 300 or 400. I can't remember the number right now. Because I just asked around, because like, this guy's, everybody loves Ivan. Everybody loves Uncle Ivan. He's the nicest guy to do business with. He's great. He's this, he's that, so on and so forth. I'm talking on the phone. He's a total gentleman. I'm waiting for him to go, I got, oh, wow, you don't really talk like that? Oh, okay. Anyways, he comes up. What a great guy. I mean, I said he was such a gentleman. All the wrestlers were like so, in awe of him. He's a real star around them. And I said, he goes, who do you want me to work? And I said, I'm looking at Tony Stetson. This guy's going to be like my tough guy kind of deal. He goes, so you want me to put him over? I said, you would put him over? He goes, sure, that's business. He goes, you got to make your kid. He goes, I'm already over. The kid beats me, gives him a... You just seen Tony when I told him he was going over. He's going, like one of those deals. I said, this guy's a professional. I mean, I hadn't done anything for Uncle Ivan after that. He was just such a great guy. And, I'm going to get off color a little bit here and there throughout the tape.
That's why we're here. We're covering ECW. You can't
I have a
knock
good
it
friend
off.
named Mark Goldman. He says to me, I'll never forget that night. He goes, Todd, holy God, Ivan Cole just washed his dick out in the sink right next to me. Oh my God. He was marking out like crazy because there's only one bathroom. So that's where the wrestlers were dressing, where the fans were going to go to the bathroom. And we still joke to this day. I go, I know, Ivan Cole washed his dick out in the sink right now. Because he said it just like that. He was like a little kid. And he wasn't a little kid at the time. It was just really funny.
Gentleman Jeff Royal and Max Thrasher.
Max Thrasher was the guy whose ring we used.
Okay. Very good.
Don't remember the other guy.
Johnny Hotbody and Luscious Larry Winters against, this is the match, J.T. Smith and D.C. Drake that you were supposed to do.
There it is. Did I tell you it was a tag team match? Okay, I didn't realize it was Hotbody and Winters. That makes more sense. Because Hotbody probably a little bit more prejudiced than Stetson. But anyway, yes, that's when they tried to swerve in that match, and that's when they lost the book after one show.
There's the Larry King Live appearance. There's a Donahue show. The reaction, is it kind of like an audible groan in the locker room, like, now this? Especially for you, this is your ascension and more ridiculousness.
Well, I think a lot of us were just worried about the whole state of the business at that time. It did come right after the Hogan steroid thing, and all that was a kind of a black eye, I think, and then this was a totally different thing, and I think it was one of those things that was incited from talk. You know, like it came from the initial. I mean, there was wrongdoing with Terry Garvin and Mal Phillips and maybe some of these other guys. I don't know what happened. It's like it came down to, it was like, what do you know? It's like, well, I don't know anything. What goes on behind some door? I got no idea what they're doing in there. You know, or if they're fraternizing with them in the bar and stuff. I don't know what they're doing.
So you hadn't seen anything that would be categorized as misconduct?
And nobody did. I don't think. Very few guys. I think that's why well, I'm sure there was a settlement in that case, but in a lot of cases, like where the FBI was trying to, put their claws into Vince and really, send him to jail for a long time. And I remember there was a big concern about it, but in the end, it was just a lot of talk, because wrestlers were saying that Vince was selling steroids when Vince clearly never ever sold steroids and was never doing anything like that. Never needed to. Never happened. But the wrestlers had conjured up a lot of this talk, and all this talk was out there. So there was a lot of stuff that was being verified by wrestlers with no real evidence.
Just because they'd heard it.
Yeah, and then same with the ring crew. I think Honky Tonk, as an example, was talking about a lot of the abuse that was going on to these young ring boys. And I don't know what Honky Tonk saw, and I don't doubt that there was some shenanigans going on there that should have been, some kind of oversight anyway. But as for what I ever saw, and for any wrestlers that I know that I've ever talked with, there was nobody saw anything, because nobody went to those rooms with those guys, and nobody did anything. It was like they were on their own. And who's to say? I don't know. But at the same time, it's like Vince, he's a pretty smart guy. So I don't think he's thinking he wouldn't jeopardize his life that way, where it's like he's got way too much on the line to make such a, when he's got billions of dollars or millions of dollars, and he can buy whatever he wants and do whatever he wants whenever he wants. And so I just have a lot of trouble buying that story. And then you look, if you ever knew her or saw her, you be the judge. But I don't buy it. I'm sorry. And I know that, I've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was with some woman, that wasn't very, she was a 2 out of 10. And you go, Arnold could get better than that.
You'd think.
But he sure missed the boat on that one. And, and you look a lot of these, like Tiger Woods is another one. He was with these 3 out of 10 skanks from Florida strip bars and stuff. And it's like, he's got all the money in the world. He could, you think he could have just gave a couple of those cops that pulled up that day with his wife and all, he could just give them a couple hundreds and tell them all to go home, I don't know how he didn't squash that whole thing in the first place, but anyway, my point is that sometimes people end up with some pretty skanky looking women, and there's no explanation for it.
Yes, so I've heard. Is Vince wearing any of this strain? Is he selling any of this? With you guys?
I never saw him ever fret at all. Like, I always thought he was really strong and composed and was taking this thing head on. But he was also very prepared for the worst, and that's where I got. And I don't know if I got a lot of that from him, but I got a lot of it from other people in the office, that in case Vince got sent to jail, and there was a big
Bring up Jerry Jarrett.
There was a backup plan to Vince would do the booking from jail, as I remember, and it was anyway. There was a lot of talk like that kind of thing. But as far as seeing Vince, he was always rock steady. I mean, I don't remember him ever being in any kind of you know. He seemed very determined to prove himself, and he did. I think a lot of us, I mean, I think every one of us resented it completely. We all saw it as the business was, the wrestling business, we were basically being paid more based on the house shows than anything else. Things were in a slump, you know, things were really kind of sliding down with all these scandals that we were talking about. Definitely were making it hard to watch. People started turning off, people stopped buying the toys, the toy companies stopped putting their commercials on the TV. It had a huge, Vince lost all his money from merchandise people. They just stopped putting commercials and stopped making product, and it had a huge effect on everything. It was like a real dark time in the company. And you know, when the bodybuilding thing started, there's these bodybuilders, and who likes bodybuilders? I mean, talk about it, zeros in life. You know, I mean, there's nothing. I can't say anything good about bodybuilders at all. What a total waste of your life. You know.
Because of the vanity? Or?
Yeah, just the vanity of just all day. You know, there's nothing special about bodybuilders other than they lift weights all day, you know.
What was
it's like beauty
fascination
pageant. Some people are, I don't know. I never had a fascination. I mean, I like a good physique and all that, but I mean, to the point of being obsessed and like bodybuilders and the dieting and the whole thing is like, who cares? Like, I don't see any ability or skill in it at all. Same with fashion models or runway models. I mean, who really gives a damn? They're too skinny and they don't look as hot as they think. But anyway, the point is that the bodybuilders were flying first class. I remember Lex Luger was flying first class when I was in the company, and dropped the belt to Yoko, and Yoko and Lex were in first class, and I remember going, it's not right. These bodybuilders shouldn't be up front and ahead of the wrestling. And all these bodybuilders were making more money. They got signed to more money than any of the top wrestlers were making.
You're kidding?
No, they all got made, and they all got paid out full contract. Like when it folded, they all got paid out. Every one of them, all those bodybuilders. Stryden, isn't that his name? Stridix or something like that. Name.
But, and now, could you pick a worse time to launch a bodybuilding federation than when you were going to begin testing people for steroids?
It was a failed, doomed enterprise right from who wants to watch bodybuilders that are not on steroids? I mean, there's no fascination with bodybuilders, period, but if they're not on steroids, like even less, like who cares? And they really, you know what, nobody cared. That WWF, whoever won it, I think, and you know, the sad thing about Lex Luger was that he was clean, totally drug-free and legit, and he looked great, and nobody believed it. No one even cared. He looked skinny compared to what he looked like in WCW, or thinner and sort of more streamlined, with thinner in the face and the neck and everything. And but he was totally legit, you know, Lex, and all the wrestlers were in the 90s, as I remember in the company, from Razor Ramon or whoever they were. The drug testing through the 90s was legit, as far as I can say.
No discussion of WBF would be complete without a mention of IcoPro. Were you a user and consumer of those special vitamins?
You remember me on the commercial? I had the dumbbells.
They make you...
Oh, I was in the magazine and everything.
But did you have to take
pumped. It? They sent crates of it to my house. Worse stuff. I mean, I honestly, I don't think it had any value to it at all. It didn't taste good. It was awful. And most of the wrestlers, you could get it for free, but we all had our own stuff. We all bought our own personal stuff, and I had it stacked up, and I'd give it to the neighbors and stuff like that.
Neighbor's dog.
And they wouldn't take it. They'd leave it back and put it on your step.
So put that's the commercial for Echo Pro. Hey, what's this again? Did it mean anything for him to put you over?
I think so. It was a big a sign of respect that he reached down and kind of pulled me up and did me a favor that day. He could have, he wouldn't have done that, I don't think, for very many guys, but he wanted to, I think he thought maybe that this was a good time for him to sort of, in his own way, kind of pass the torch back to somebody, and he kind of picked me. I think it was a big honor for me to know. And I was never quite sure what was going to happen at WrestleMania. I saw Roddy as a huge draw and a bigger star than I was, and I didn't, even though I was in my clear understanding I would win the belt back at WrestleMania 8. At the same time, you know, I just figured they'd come up that day and go, we've got to change the plans and change it on me. So I was worried about it, but I also, either way, I had a lot of respect for Roddy. I would have taken the match, win or lose.
Did you enjoy any of this, or were you always waiting for the other shoe to drop?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it just being given the chance, like winning the Intercontinental title, you know, from Mr. Perfect. That was a big honor for me. Even winning the tag belts was a big honor, but I never felt with the tag belts that we really got a good push. We didn't have a lot of great teams to work with when we ended up with the belts as tag champions. But as an Intercontinental champion, just saying I got to work with Perfect and Roddy Piper as two of my first 3 or 4 big matches. I wasn't complaining too much. Like, I was happy with both those guys and what they were going to do for me.
You bled heavily, and there was a no blade policy at this time, right? What happened there? Did you go into business for yourself, or was it?
You know, it was a gut call. You know, it was a questionable call. You know, it's funny, but I remember being in Moncton, New Brunswick, or I think it was Moncton. Yeah, it was Moncton, New Brunswick, with Roddy Piper. We didn't see each other very often. He happened to be on the road where I was, and we hadn't seen each other for a couple of weeks. And he said, it was like I knew he was going to be there, and it's like, okay, we're going to finally talk about what we're going to do in this match. And I didn't really have a plan in my head, but I had a lot of ideas in my head about what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do this, this, and this, and I didn't want to, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I remember sitting down, like, Roddy was a really good friend of mine, kind of a mentor and sort of a guy I really looked up to. But I'd worked with a lot of guys I looked up to, and when you sat down with them, being a younger guy and working with somebody you have a lot of respect for, sometimes doesn't play out the way you want it to because you have too much respect for them, and you end up where you're not true to yourself. And I was similar. Before I sat down with Roddy, I thought, oh, I hope this doesn't prove to be like where we suddenly don't see eye to eye on any of what we're going to do. And so we sat down in a really nice little restaurant, and he goes, this is what I was thinking. And he laid out the whole match for me, or what we saw as the match. And I remember it was like, as he talked, it was like, this is exactly what I want to do as the match. We were on the exact same page, and we both had very few, and it was in that conversation, I think, that Roddy said, you know what would really make this match is if you got a little color in it. And it was just a thought that we would try it, maybe think about it, and I would, the big question wasn't whether I could do it, it was a question of whether I could get away with it. And if you know the facts about that whole day is that Flair and Macho Man went out, I guess, right after us, and they were planning on doing the same thing. Well, they got fined. I mean, I never got fined.
I was going to ask you about that.
Because I was more professional. You know, you don't see me. Ric Flair, you see this stuff, like all, you know, it's like, there's no art to that. You know, it's like just everybody knows, hey, there's a guy, wrestler, cutting his forehead again, you know. Why is he cutting himself, Dad? Like, I don't know. Like, where in my case, I don't think you see me cut myself ever.
But does Vince pull you aside and say, you know, you weren't supposed to do that?
No, he didn't know. Nobody knew. And they asked me. They asked me if me and Roddy.
Oh, so you passed it off as hard way?
We passed off as hard way. And when I came back to the dressing room, me and Roddy had a bit of a pull-apart where the wrestlers, Chief Jay Strongbow kind of, we didn't have a pull-apart, but Roddy kind of made out like he was going to go for me, and I think they kind of like, hey, let it go, and he kind of stormed off the other way. But we played up that he was, you know, that there was a bit of heat between us. And they pulled Roddy aside and asked him if he had anything to do with it, and he denied it. And when they pulled me aside, I denied it, and they weren't 100% sure. I think that's really what it is they couldn't 100% for sure. And there's a lot of people that say, well, that's where he's doing it, because and it's like, when I watch, I go, that's not what I'm doing it. I'm not cutting myself there. I'm just looking like I'm cutting myself there, because I knew that I was going to be putting my hands up in my head a lot, so I could put my hands up in my head a lot earlier in the match where people didn't know, and there was no blood, and then suddenly there is blood. So, but anyway, it was done well enough that nobody really knew. I think he was supposed to do a job for Taker in the middle of the ring, and he changed it and got he got pile drove or whatever into the tombstone into the floor and didn't make it in for the count and got counted out instead. He called that live audio, an audible in the ring, and Undertaker was not happy about it because he kind of got cheated out of a clean win. Also, it's my understanding, and maybe that's why, my understanding was that I was set to work with Jake the Snake at the SummerSlam, 92, before they had the card made up or where it was or anything. And when Jake left, I remember it's like, I think it was Pat Patterson told me, it's, you know, too bad that he got, you know, fired or left or both or whatever it was. He wasn't with the company anymore. And it was like, because he was working with me with SummerSlam, he was going to put you over at SummerSlam, and it never happened. So it's like, that would have been the first and only time I ever worked with Jake the Snake, which is, it is a shame that we didn't get to work. Well, I'm not sure what the motives were, and I'm not sure that they'd made our mind up on Flair yet. I think they were just doing a storyline, and maybe there was plans to do things with either one of them there. What it really was is, in my opinion, was they were looking for somebody to pull the sword out of the stone. That things had never been, Hogan had rocked everything for 5 years or so, I don't know how long, from 84 to 91. He had topped everything that anyone could imagine in wrestling. He was the biggest icon in the business, and when he left, it's like if he wasn't on the card, nobody wanted to come, kind of thing. And the other wrestlers, we worked hard and slowly sort of built an audience back that wasn't based on Hulk Hogan through that period. But it was really hard to fill the shoes of Hulk Hogan, like with the next star. I mean, Warrior tried. I can't say he didn't do a good job. I thought he did as good a job as that person, the next person, could do. I thought he drew well enough, and he was over strong enough, and he looked the part. And then when Macho Man was much more loved by the boys in the dressing room. Everyone liked Randy and appreciated Randy's work ethic and just how much of a pro Randy was. And so when Randy got the sort of the nod, or through that period, and Warrior dropped the ball and got fired or whatever happened to him, but Macho Man was always a steady, solid guy to rely on to put the belt on, might have been in a sense just to figure out who you're going to where the next big superstar is going to come from. And I think they were all looking for someone. I don't know that Randy was necessarily expected to pull the sword out of the stone, but he was one of the guys that was there to kind of try to do his best.
He's going to do Mr. Nanny. He's going off to film that. Was there no expectation that he would come back? Or was this just an angle?
No, I think I saw it. I did him a big drawing. I made a big drawing of all the wrestlers, like a collage, a cartoon of all the wrestlers, and had everybody sign it. The dressing room was huge. It was a big, giant picture that took me hours to work on it. And I gave it to him because I thought he was done. He was going to go to Hollywood and be Arnold Schwarzenegger #2.
Why wasn't Flair and Hogan the main event of WrestleMania?
I don't know the answer to that. Maybe because they didn't have an ending that was suitable. I don't know. I'm not sure. What was the ending? Sid and somebody?
Sid and Hogan. But should that not have been especially with Hogan going off finally now?
They might have already played Flair. I know that if you work a lot, they may have played that card through the winter enough that they didn't feel it had the drawing power at WrestleMania. But I don't know. Vince is funny that way.
Did everyone know she was separating from?
No, I think we all, most of us loved Randy and loved Liz. Liz was such a great girl to be around. She was just a real classy lady, kind of just a girl that everybody loved. Everybody loved her, and she was a trooper. She trooped along, and the roads could be pretty hard on a girl, and she was always a flower. Kind of, she always still looked good, and always carried herself so well, and she was pretty tireless. And Randy was with the media and stuff they did to promote themselves, and I always had a lot of respect. And I think everyone, I don't know very few guys that didn't have a lot of respect for both of them. And when we finally realized that there was issues between them, problems, I think we all felt bad because it was kind of like, I don't know, he got to travel around with his wife. A lot of us, or some of us, might have thought it might be a great idea to travel around with our wives. But I think most of us knew when Randy's marriage failed that it was like, that's probably what did it. More than anything was that just that constant being face to face in a prison cell all the time.
I've asked many people here, is it ever a good idea to bring your shoot wife into the wrestling business? Does that ever work? Has it ever worked?
I don't know. It can work. I think Randy and Liz, it could have worked, and Randy had kind of living a life like a bird in a cage. That's really what it was. He was super jealous. The character that he played, where he would play that he was really jealous, that's a real character. I've seen Randy go off because somebody looked at Liz or someone. And I always wondered, because I looked at her lots and I never had any problem with him. And me and Randy always got along good, but sometimes he would just go off on some guys, and he had a real problem with stuff like that. And and I think Liz may be tired of some of that, and I can't say. As far as I know, being around both of them, they were always a good team. And when they split up, I never felt that they were the same without each other. They were always kind of a little, kind of lost and sort of out on a kite string cut.
Are you and he still close? I know you were close at the time. Okay.
We've been close since the day I got him into that sports bar shows.
I was going to say, was it something that developed over the years, or did you just kind of instantly have
we hit it off right away because
yeah.
he's a big sports fan.
Yeah.
I'm a big Philly sports fan, so we can go back and forth and go, no, this '79 team was better. No, the '83. We go back, and again, we're born the same day. We both like to smoke and drink a little bit, so we just hit it off, and we were just best friends like
right.
that. And it just stayed that way. We traveled together all through the years in ECW.
What's your best behind-the-scenes Sandman story?
I wouldn't even know where to begin.
He's told so many about you.
I can just do it.
Our program.
I could do an hour and a half on Sandman. I can tell you about behind the scenes. I can tell you about the night we were in New York. And he said, man, one of these days I gotta fuck Missy Hyatt. I just gotta fuck Missy Hyatt. All right, well, hopefully we make your moves and we're done. So we go to do a show in New York. I go in the bathroom and I hear, that's Missy Hyatt's head going into the sink as he's fucking her in the bathroom. And her doing it. I go, hey, man. She goes, hey, Todd. Boom, boom, boom. This is, I mean.
That was the environment.
It was the fact that she was, I said, Okay, you know that's different. She's getting fucked in the middle of the bathroom. All the guys say, "Excuse me, I got to pee." Go around me. Go around this side. I mean, that's a typical Sandman story. One of my all-time favorites is, you know, he's a bender guy. I mean, he's known for his benders. He's notorious for his benders. Even the dog agrees with me.
Yeah.
He's notorious for his benders.
Fucking the dog in the sink one time.
4 or 5
I'm not going to
days.
talk about that, though.
4 or 5 days awake. You know, he's stay up drinking the entire time, snorting a little bit to keep himself awake. So he goes down on South Street here in Philadelphia, which is where a lot of nightclubs and stuff like that are. There's long lines to get in them and stuff. You know, there are dance clubs, this kind of club, that kind of club. So he goes, he's just partying in the streets, you know, no shirt on, of course, you know, the snot rag hanging out of his pocket. And he goes, "Yo, Sandman, Sandman." One of the bouncers goes, "Yo, come on, dude, you don't need a light, come on." So they bring Sandman to the front line, he goes inside, he's dancing away to music. And they're going, "Go, Sandman, go, Sandman." He gets up on the table, "Go, Sandman." And he goes, you realize there's not a girl anywhere in the bar. He goes, "Oh shit, I'm in a gay bar." "Okay, go Sandman, go Sandman." He goes, and he starts doing the conga line right out through the kitchen, out the back door. I mean, that's just typical Sandman. He's the best.
Love it. Do you reach out to them? Are they recommended?
No, they were recommended. Someone said, "Yeah, you got to meet my buddy Gary." It's probably Sandman. Yeah, my buddy Gary. Well, his partner Anthony was still in Japan at the time, I believe. I don't think they worked. They worked as a team. That said.
Yes, they're actually known as Spike and Rex.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that all evolved obviously into the Dogs of War. But
do you know early on that they're going to be somebody? I mean, is that you have a sensor?
You can see who's got it and who doesn't have it, like really right away almost. But you also can make people who have just a little bit of ability, you know, much bigger than they are if they give them something with like a character that they have confidence in. A wrestler's confidence can carry him a long way in the ring, a lot more you think, even when you're disguising what they don't do well. Right. You can have a match where you say, "Oh, well, I can't do a monkey flip. Whatever you do, don't try to make me do a monkey flip." All right, what can you do? Let's go with that. You know, let's push that along. You know, what kind of things you like to say? Do when you're not here? Like, what's your personality? You try to give them a personality kind of deal. But the Pitbulls, they'd worked in Japan. They had Japanese experience, so they already had the ability to actually work. They can do some real work as a tag team. In order to make somebody, really make it in my locker room, if we start doing this as a regular thing, you want people to get behind people. You want them to have us to care about what they're saying. So in order to do that, obviously you make yourself have a championship. So that's something for them all to fight for. So you can get involved in thinking like, "Oh, I hope this guy gets to meet this guy along the way," or "I hope that this guy gets to fight this guy," because that makes you invested in the person as a wrestler. What you would do then was, I needed a star. Okay, so one person like I did with Ivan, just to get the people in the building, because for whatever reason you want them to be there to see. They're not going to come if you say your main event's going to be Larry Winters against Johnny Hotbody. You get 30 people from South Philly, but that's Johnny's friends. Right. So Jimmy hadn't been on TV in a little bit. Well, not that long, but just long enough that he was still like, "Ooh, he's fresh." So I talked to Jimmy, and we worked out a deal, and he came in. And my thought process was to make him the first champion so that he could make one of my guys really the first champion. Yes. Never realized at the time that Jimmy was going to become like a lifelong ECW guy. But at the time, he was just going to be for that 1 or 2 shows, because I think we did 2 that weekend, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. And hopefully he was going to make, at that point, I think it was going to be Johnny Hotbody. He was going to be the first one originally. And it turned out to be Sandman, I guess.
What is Jimmy being over at this point? Does this speak to Philadelphia or a wrestling city's appreciation for the history of the talent that you bring in?
Absolutely. The Snook and Morocco feud was a sell here. I mean, you couldn't. That's what they all wanted to see. They wanted to see Jimmy come off the top of the cage. I mean, when he did it with
Backlund and then Morocco.
Right. And then Morocco, Backlund first. I mean, that was something people hadn't seen before. And people went like, "Whoa."
How was he to do business with, Jimmy? from a promoter standpoint.
Unfortunately, I had to deal with his wife at the time.
Right.
Who was a little bit more difficult than Jimmy. But once we got she had to come with him the first time. I didn't pay for her to come in, but she had to come with him the first time. She had to make sure everything was the way she wanted it to be. She was very controlling, I'd say. And but the second time, he was never going to bring her with him again because, he said, this is cool. We're let's chill. And Jimmy and I became really tight. We traveled a little bit together. I can go on about Jimmy another one. I can tell story after story. Jimmy Snook is he's funny and he's fun. You're going to get to the sports bar, so I'll wait to get to the sports bar to tell you one of the good Jimmy Snook stories.
He didn't have a late night confession about Nancy Argentina ever at a bar
never
or
discussed
anything
it.
like that? Okay. Wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you that. Snuka defeats Sal Bellomo for the title. Now, the decision to bring him into the company, and you use him pretty prominently early on, came from what?
Well, he was one of the ones, oddly enough, most of the talent, when they find out someone's running shows anywhere, give me the number, give me the number, give me the number, give me the number. So Bellomo contacted me. He said, listen, I come from a Jimmy Thorpe. It's only a drive. Right. I don't charge you very much. I'm a Bachigaloop. I'm coming down. So he said, his name I'd heard of. Right. So, sure. You're not going to charge me trans or any hotel, and you're only this much. Come on down. So because he was the only recognizable name, and he had worked Jimmy before in WWF way back then, it was a natural, to somehow get those two towards the top of the card.
Did he get a pop from the crowd?
Not really. No, not the way you would have thought. Because number one, remember when he's in WWF, he was just clean shaven, wearing the Italian tights, and he came up doing the cartwheels. Now he comes out, he's got a beard like this. He's got hair like Bruiser Brody. He was unrecognizable, so that's why he didn't get the pop he would have normally gotten. Although, oddly enough, they would have shit on him just the other way, because the other way was the kind of babyface they all hated here.
But maybe because of the history, would have been over.
It would have gotten the initial...
Closer than the Wolfman thing that he showed.
It would have been more recognizable. I don't know if it would have been as over.
Supposedly Harvey Whippleman's urine in a Visine bottle squirted into the thing. Harvey's was probably clean. We can agree to that.
It's all a possibility, but I really don't remember it at the time. If it was, there was a lot of that kind of stuff, if you weren't privy to it, you didn't know what happened. You just thought they just weren't there anyway in the dressing room.
Sid Vicious in general, his love for softball and wrestling sometimes would come into play. Was he a guy that took the business seriously?
Sid was a guy that was just, in my opinion, he was a guy that was naive a bit, or gullible. Like, you could really play with him. You could stir him up in the dressing room about his check, or anything about the hotel or the gym that they went to. You get him stirred up. You could just keep kind of. My brother Owen would have a field day with someone like Sid. I don't think he knew Sid existed yet, but it's like Sid wasn't such a harmful guy, or he wasn't a guy to self-destruct so much as if somebody encouraged him and kind of led him that way. And like I remember one time in Canada, we did a thing with the CFL football players, where he just had in his head that he wasn't going to let any football player, nobody was touching him. They didn't want any football player laying a finger on him, and he just got really difficult. It was raw, trying to work it out the match. They were like lumberjacks. And I was like, Sid. And I remember I pulled him aside. I said, this is like really elementary stuff. And I just talked to him and explained what was going on. I said, these guys are just going to throw you in the ring. They're just going to roll you under the bottom rope, and don't worry, and he was fine. But I sensed in that situation that you could really get him, you could have got him so steamed up about it that he would have quit over having a football player touch him when he really didn't know what he was even talking about. Like, they weren't going to necessarily, he could get himself, he could go on a tangent and get himself all worked up, and guys would play into that. I think guys that rode with him would stir him up and get him all worked up, or maybe when he was drinking, I hear about the stuff with the squeegee and stuff like that. I don't know. Sid was a good guy whenever I was around him. He never caused any problems for me, or he was always a good guy. Just just sensed that vulnerability in him, that he would be an easy guy to manipulate and get him to walk in and confront someone about his check, or he'd make a big, he could really work him up.
This is what your plan was all along,
Yes.
though, right? Jimmy's there to serve as the conduit for your guy to get over. And Jimmy was fine with this.
100%. And I'll tell you something else. Ties right to Sandman again. It's a true story. I get a phone call. I can't remember who the hell it was. It may have been, I'll tell you who it was the music guy, Steve Truitt. One of the first ones who had come in and asked me to do this promotion. I hear Hacks winning the belt. So I was going to put the belt on Sandman. I said, did you? I said, I didn't even decide I was getting it. Why did you hear? I don't know where you heard that. He goes, well, he told me he was. And I called him up. I said, dude, I can't give it to you now.
Right.
I said, everything that I feel about the right way to do things. I'm not saying you're fired or anything, but I can't do that. Right. When you're telling people you're going to win, they all know what's going to happen when you get there. It takes all the out of the show. You just killed it. Oh, fucking killed Truitt, dead.
It's Troy's fault.
I said, well, really, you're the one who told. Okay, nonetheless, all right, it's all cool. And I love you, Hacky, and I do. I said, but, I can't put the belt on here. So I put it on Hot Body instead.
How did Owen feel about being put with Coco? And how about those outfits?
I think Owen was maybe stunned, and I think he felt for sure that he was being ribbed.
They were finally getting Owen back.
He was sure mad at Jim. I'll tell you that. That's probably the truth. He was really mad at Neidhart. He really was. He liked, Jim was a great guy to be with. He was a good partner, and he was a lot of fun on the road, and he was an entertaining guy. He was fun to, even now, he's a fun guy to be with. And Owen actually liked kind of being the babysitter and taking my old spot and kind of taking care of Jim and getting him from A to B and making sure he didn't get crazy. And Jim got along with Owen just well like he did with me. It was kind of worked out good for him. And it was like, Owen turned his back. I think it was on that one trip or one day when Owen wasn't there that then Jim got fired. I think he missed the town. I think he had gone home, and the first day on the road, Jim wasn't there, and that was the end of it for him. They had given him, I think, a few chances by then. And I don't know if that was the last one or maybe the monitor thing happened.
But it was one of his chances.
Yeah, and I don't think Owen was too happy about the Coco thing. It was kind of a rib, and it was kind of like, they don't have any choice sometimes. You got to do it. And Owen, you got to admire him for at least doing it. He pulled it off, and Coco was good enough to be his partner too. I think it was an odd combination, but they did whatever they could to make it work.
In that line of suspension of disbelief, we talked about the Undertaker thing before, and in someone else's hands, the sitting up, the zombie thing, could have been ridiculous. Was this ridiculous?
It was maybe the worst. It's right up there with the gobbledygook as maybe like the second worst idea they ever did. I remember watching it and going, that's awful. That's everything that pro wrestling should never try to be. That's fake. It was awful. I think Vince knew when he did it after it was done that it was like it was like breaking kayfabe. It was awful. It was one of the dumbest things they ever did, and it took a long time to move. Only a Bret Hart could clean up that mess.
Now Charles, who's like a fun, loving, good-natured guy, an odd guy to pick to play a mute zombie.
No, not really. I thought he had a great look. If anything, I liked Papa Shango and the look and the gimmick and the name. I wish they had kept it. I don't think they should have built him stronger. the way they should have kept building him the way they were. He was actually a pretty. I thought he was a good worker.
Well, good worker, but Charles has a great magnetic personality. Maybe they weren't taking. Maybe they could have had.
Well, they could have got maybe a mouthpiece for him if that's the case. But he was that kind of a freaky monster that he could have easily had a mouthpiece. That's kind of where they fit best, is with a guy like Papa Shango. I think Pat Patterson hated the gimmick, hated Papa Shango's work, and maybe wasn't a big fan of him either. And kind of shut that idea down when it was still kind of getting the wheels up and running still. And that thing with Warrior was almost killed him off. Like it was it left a bad taste. It made everyone groan and turn wrestling off. Like it was awful.
Now you're taking a chance here. This is a tremendous expense, I would imagine.
Again, didn't cost me a dime.
What?
I got a phone call. In fact, it may have been Gary Wolf who said, "Listen, these people in Japan, they're doing a tour." Or no, Gary Juster.
Oh.
Gary Juster got a hold of me. He goes, "I know you're doing shows. Listen, this tattoo wants to come in. They won't cost you a dime. They're going to pay you a big international store. They're going to bring them into the sports bars." But the thing is, you have to do it on a Sunday. It's the only days available is Sunday. I said, I'll make a Sunday show. Do I care if it's Tuesday or Sunday? Right. If I can draw people, actually get a payday out of some one of these shows, that'd be a nice change of pace. So yeah, they brought him in, there's interpreters, and didn't pay him a dime. He was just, they were filming it the whole time for their own self. It was his, he had lost the title in Japan, and now this was starting at the bottom again and working his way back up. That's the storyline they're presenting in Japan.
So it was perfect. Your venue was perfect.
Everything was perfect for me. Yeah, it was didn't quite, listen, and they said to me, you got a $4,000 ticket. I said, sorry, what? I thought you said $4,000 ticket. That would never gone past the first 5 words of the conversation.
I thought it was a good gimmick. He was a pretty scary looking guy. Formidable looking guy. He was a pretty big guy. He's about 6'4", 6'5". He looked like a badass dude from a prison or a chain gang or something. You know, I think gimmick-wise, it was a good gimmick, and it had a good look and a good idea, and Nails was a great name.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that probably a lot of better workers could have turned that gimmick into a better gimmick, like into a. It was a good gimmick.
How was he behind the scenes? Everyone get along with Kevin?
I think so. Everyone got. He was kind of quiet and did his own thing, and he had a reputation for being a pretty tough guy, and so nobody really messed with him. And you know, he was more just like a fixture in the dressing room. Like, you know, you just walk past him. No, I don't remember. Other than saying hi to him, he was always kind of minding his own business, and was one of the Minneapolis guys, which all the Minneapolis guys were good guys. They're all kind of, there was a tight bond between all of them. They're all from like the same neighborhood in Robbinsdale or whatever. So he was in with all the Minneapolis guys, and from what I could tell, he got on with pretty well with everybody, but nobody messed with him. He definitely had a strong reputation for being a guy not to mess with him.
That'll come up in a little bit, as you know. Is there a collective sigh of relief when this is finally over and Vince can get back to doing wrestling exclusively?
A lot of us were resentful that that the money that should have been filtering down to us on the cards that were doing all the work was being sort of offshot to the bodybuilders that keep their little thing going. And when they folded, everybody was glad to see it fold. I think we were sorry that Vince lost so much money and wished that he'd maybe invested it in his wrestlers, but business was in a slump, and you know, I think those were the toughest years that I remember ever in the business, as far as scheduling and the road and the traveling, and you know, I don't know of any, you know, there's a lot of wrestlers that had worked pretty heavy pace in the early '80s when wrestling was booming. 84, 85, 86, 87, but 92, that time period specifically you're talking about was really tough.
What is this?
I'll never know. It killed,
Merchandising ploy? They wanted to make ventriloquist dolls?
I don't know. It totally messed Hawk's mind
Christ's
up.
sake.
He was never the same after that. He cracked at the Wembley, and I think it was all on account of that puppet or whatever. He cracked. I'm not kidding you. It drove him nuts. He hated the idea, hated the gimmick, and Vince wanted to turn them. He wanted to make them more fun, I guess. I don't know. It was a awful idea, and it was right up there with Gobbledygook and maybe Red Rooster.
We're adding to the list. The Rooster's been put on the list there. Bruce Pritchard, in our last release of our series, Guest Booker, vehemently defends the Red Rooster gimmick with passion and conviction that here's a guy who's the cock of the walk. Why wouldn't you make him the Red Rooster? Just want you to know what's going on out there. If you
now you know
seen
why
it.
Bruce is where he is.
Do you know why Paul Ellering joined LOD in WWE after so long? There was a period of time where they worked there, and then he came in later.
I think he did it out of sort of respect for the two of them, and sort of like, I think they needed him. They needed something new and something different, and he was their sort of legendary manager that had done so much with them, and he was a very sort of cool wrestler guy that a lot of, like, even the wrestlers themselves in the dressing room were curious about Paul Ellering and what he was really like. He was kind of a mystery as to what he was all about. But he was kind of laid back, kind of cool guy. I wouldn't say like a hippie, but kind of like a loner that he lived on a mountain or something. But he was like, he'd come back from some faraway place to help out and do this thing. It was like that for real. Like, it was like they were hawking at him. I think we're really glad to have him back. And I think he came back, maybe, I'm guessing, I'm just reaching out, but maybe it was like Hawk had a lot of drug problems, and maybe it was a way to kind of babysit him and be there and kind of mentor him back into being on a straighter path.
Is Bob relevant in '92?
I would think he was in that northeast region. He for sure he would be, because he, they wrestled there for so long, and Bob was a hard guy not to respect. So I mean, if you remembered him and you sort of were from that era, yeah, I think he was relevant. But at the same time, at that exact time, it was when they were doing those. Was it the Huckster and. They with Ted Turner,
The Nacho Man,
and all that, and they were going with WCW had all the old guys, and we were the new generation. I think that's what they called us even on TV. We're doing new generation, the new, and then it's like it was hard to in a way you had Flair, who was in his mid-40s then, and say Bob Backlund coming back. I think they worked the Rumble in '92. Or '93, maybe it was when they worked. Yeah. But they were definitely had star power. I remember I was kind of impressed watching Flair tie up with Backlund in the Rumble. Like, I was just watching in the back, but it was cool for me to see the two of them who I'd watched all my life, or heard about all my life. And here they were locked up, and I don't know what they did in the Battle Royal or when they got dumped out and stuff like that. But it was just kind of cool to see them touch, to actually work, and that meant something.
Tommy Cairo contacts me, and he said, I'd love to come work for you, but you don't, instead, do this. I want to bring another guy I want to work with. His name was Damian Stone. And we worked a lot together. Don't have to pass. It's always the magic words. Everybody's looking for work, you know. You don't have to pass. Let us show you what we got. If you like us, then hire us and make us part of your crew. And I said, okay, you know, whatever. I didn't just a voice on the phone to me. So I went, whatever, that's fine. So they came in, and I'm pretty sure, what day did you say it was?
July 14th.
Okay. Before that, at the time I was president of the Variety Club, which is a children's charity. It's an international charity. Local branches, you know, and I was president of Philadelphia, which is $1 million charity here. We serve children children who are physically handicapped, and provide braces and wheelchairs, and it's still a big charity here in the area. We had a 24-hour telethon that Monty Hall used to be the host of and bring celebrity. Anyway, I was the president of this organization. I said I had planned to do a free show for the kids out at the camp. It was a camp and developmental center where these kids their parents get a break for 2 weeks out of a year. The only break they get, where they get to take their kids to camp, and the kids are there overnight for 2 weeks with trained, you know, professionals, and the experience is amazing. So I said, I want to give them a free show. I'm going to give them a show. So I told everybody, I want you all to work. I'm not paying you, because I'm not selling a ticket, but I'll remember it. So that was the first show I used Tommy in, because nobody was getting paid that day anyway. They tore the house down. They looked like they'd been doing this, you know, in and out, night around the world for like 5 years. I gave them both jobs out of it.
Why are we going back to snooker?
Where are we at now?
July.
July. I think at that time Jimmy was going to maybe move to the States, closer to the East or something like that, but he was going to be the guy I was going to ride. He was going to be my horse. He was going to be my only, you know, flying kind of talent. But he would stay for like a week or two at a time, so he'd be on 2 or 3 shows at a time with me.
Right.
And lessen, you know, the blow of the airfare or whatever.
Where was he at this point? I know he was in
Utah.
Jersey for a long time, so he was in Utah. Okay. Talk to me about the Chestnut Cabaret, Todd. What the hell is the Chestnut Cabaret?
The Chestnut Cabaret was a strip club at 30th and Market Street, about 22 blocks up from Mike Schmidt's bar. It was just a chance to hit a different neighborhood, because I felt like the only people who were drawing here were the people over and over, the same, you know, 80 to 100 people we knew that came to every show from Joel's to whatever. It was that crew. And we had never had a chance to actually expand at all. So this was not really expanding so much, because now it's still a cheap venue where, you know, right. He's just happy to get the drink sales. He, you know, you use the building for, you know, a nominal fee, $100, and I'll just keep the money from the liquor and right. Food, and you keep the money from the tickets.
Well, the business plan was to expand eventually to Jersey and Delaware, so you went 22 blocks north.
That's correct.
That was step one.
Except. About 2-3 days before the show, I'm getting phone calls, or maybe it was the week of the show, from all these feeling, what kind of bullshit is this? We can't go to the show? I said, what do you mean you can't go to the show? It's supposed to be a Saturday afternoon show.
Who's calling you? Who did you say?
Fans.
Oh, fans.
Because they knew it was Carver Reed, or whatever it was, they were calling the Holland. You have to be 21 to get in the place. I go, what do you mean you have to be 21 to get in the place? You never said that to me. So I was calling, he goes, no, we sell liquor here, no one allowed. I said, can you put bands on the wrist for the, nope.
Really?
Nobody under 21 gets in. I had about 17 to 20 people there for the first show.
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded. I was devastated. That's the first time I ever really got beat up on a show financially. I mean, I had lost a little bit, you know, made a little bit, but this was, you know, destruction. Yeah. And out of that show, something really funny happened. Paying each guy their $50, $75, $100 for everybody made per show. Last guy in the locker was JT Smith. I go, here, man, He goes, I can't take that. I said, what do you mean you can't take it? He's Todd. No, you're a nice guy, but I can't take your money. You got killed tonight. I wouldn't do that to you. I said, what are you talking about? He ripped the check up. I said, John, are you serious? Absolutely. I hired him that day for my store.
Yeah.
Because that guy, I got to have him work for me in a store. I trust him.
Wow.
And you're working with diamonds with something this big to be worth, $100,000. You got to be very careful who you hire.
Right.
He had my trust that day.
Well, the truth is that I had gone to Vince from the first day I joined the company, within the first few weeks of being in the company, to Vince and tell him about that he should think about trying to do these ladder matches. Then I told him the concept, and they never had any interest. And I'd come about a year later, I'd say, there's something they should really think about is these ladder matches. They'd be really great. And I explained the whole thing, the concept to them again, and they'd always... And then I got where it's like, I would go to Vince and I'd say, I got this idea, but you got to promise me you won't do it with anyone else but me. And he said, what is it? And it's this ladder match. And I'd tell him the whole idea again. And that'd be going on for, I don't know, what's that, 8 years or so.
Yeah.
And the way it all happened was that Duggan and Perfect were doing the commentary in those days, and they both pulled me aside and said, we got the news today that SummerSlam's going to be it's going to either be in Wembley Stadium or it's going to be in Washington, D.C. at the Cap Center. And so when I won the belt from Piper, I had been told that it was in all likelihood that I would probably drop the belt at SummerSlam to somebody. It wasn't said for sure who or... And so I thought, okay, so I'm dropping the belt at SummerSlam. Good chance. If it's in Wembley Stadium in England, it's got to be Davey. I could drop it to Davey. It would work. That would be that would make sense and it would work. That would be. Davey was over pretty strong in England, so it would be a natural matchup. But then I thought, well, but if it's in Washington D.C., the Davies card isn't necessary to play so much now because of the England thing. But it was like I thought. And they had told me they thought I'd be working with Sean at SummerSlam. And it was like, if I got to drop the belt to somebody, why don't I try to get them to do the ladder match again? And I'll do the ladder match. And I went to Vince and I said, I walked in Maine or wherever it was that we filmed that. I said, I heard two things, that it's either going to be Wembley or Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And I told him both ideas. I said, but if it's in Washington, D.C., let me do a ladder match with Sean. And I guess he was maybe having to make this decision right in the next day or two, so I was right on that. He goes, show it to me. Show me the match. And I go, with who? He goes, just pick anybody. Pick Sean. I said, well, I'll pick Sean. So I pick Sean. I go find Sean, and I say, Sean, I got this idea. And I tell him the whole idea, and we're going to do a ladder match. I said, I just got to show Vince the concept. And Sean was very confused as to what it was. So what do I do? Right. And this is what you got to do, and you got to keep trying to climb the ladder. And I keep telling him what happened. So we go out and do this, just a demonstration match. That's all it is. It's just.
Is this the match that's on Wrestling Challenge?
This is the match. That's the only match that we ever did in a ladder, and they kept it and they air it today. It was just a throw. I wrestled 3 times that day. It was like I just wanted to demonstrate with it. There was no real. We weren't trying to make it the ladder match at WrestleMania 10. We were just trying to make it a ladder match. And it's always bothered me that they stole the idea. Sean knew then, here's my idea. And they stole my idea. They didn't ask me if they could use the idea. They stole my idea, and it was already in print before I ever knew that. But it bothered me because the truth is I would love to have wrestled my brother Owen in a ladder match at SummerSlam instead of the cage. The cage was. I would love to have done a cage with somebody, but it didn't have to be Owen. It could have been. I could have had a great ladder match. It just always bothered me. And Vince always promised me that he'd never do it with anyone else, but they stole that idea from me, and it was the idea that was great. I mean, I always hear about Razor and Sean having this great match at WrestleMania. I go, well, it's great, but they ripped off the idea from me, and it's the idea that's great, not the match. Scott was a good pal of Kurt's. Perfect. He was. They've been down the road together in different places. I think in AWA and Razor had kind of bounced around. I don't think I never got the impression when Razor started that he was like a real pro yet. Like he was still pretty green. And mind you, he did really well when he first came in. I just I wasn't sure what kind of guy he was when I first met him, but he was, like I say, he was one of the Minneapolis guys. I'm not sure if he was living in Minneapolis or whatnot, but he was always a good guy. He was always in those days he was really pretty focused and fun to be around. I think the business can be fun when you first get into it, and he just got into it, and he got a kind of a lucky break, and they were giving him a pretty good push, and I think the gimmick, as I remember, they were trying to come up with a name for him, and he had gone into Vince's office and to try to sell himself on getting a job, and he did an imitation of, I think Kurt was in there with him. Kurt took him in, and he did an imitation of Al Pacino or whatever, doing the Scarface, and Vince loved it, and he got a job out of it. And I remember even that night after he was hired, and they were going to do the gimmick with him, going to give him a big push, and it was like it all happened pretty quick for him. But I do remember Kurt going, "We got to come up with a name," and it's like I think it was Kurt that came up with the name, Razor Ramon. Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was Scott, but I know it was all happened in a couple of minutes in the dressing room, where it's like, okay, this is his name, and this is his gimmick, and the little bit with the hair all came in the few weeks that it took they were starting to prepare him for that. But Scott did a lot of that on his own. He created that gimmick, and it wasn't easy to do. I don't think to play. The same reason I didn't want to play a cowboy Bret Hart. They wanted me to be Vince back in the '80s. They'd given me my first break was going to be as Cowboy Bret Hart. And I remember thinking about it, and at first I was all gung ho about it, like we're finally going to do something with me. And then by the end of the night, I realized I don't want to be a cowboy. It's awful hard. I'm not a real cowboy. I'm going to be on TV everywhere, and people are going to go, "Can you ride a horse?" It's like, I'm kind of scared of horses. It's like, what kind of cowboy would I really be? Like, and I finally just, I knew I didn't think I could carry it off in the long of it. Like, I wasn't a rodeo guy, or I wasn't a real cowboy. And I knocked on the George Scott's door and told him, I said, I can't do it. And it's the same thing with Scott Hall.
He's not a Cuban drug dealer. He's not a Cuban drug dealer,
but he took it and made it work. And, that's how I remember him. I always remember him as Razor Ramon. The WCW days are all lost to me as far as being worth remembering.
What's the nature of the relationship between Vince and Memphis now?
I don't know. I think it's like Andrew Jackson taking New Orleans. It was like Vince was just taking the controls of the wrestling there.
But clearly, there's some agreement to acknowledge each other, and
Jerry's always been a real loyal WWE guy since then. I think he's one of Vince's right-hand guys, and I have a lot of respect for both of them on that regard. They've had a good relationship for a really long time, and Jerry's always been I always think that if you go back to my era, to the 90s, this time period, the stuff I did with Jerry Lawler I was so glad I wrestled Jerry. He was so much fun to work with, so easy to work with, and he was one of the best heel wrestlers ever. Like in the upcoming years when the wrestling fans started to boo the bad guys or boo the good guys and cheer the bad guys. I remember it was like that in Philadelphia, and they did that pay-per-view with a Kiss My Foot match. And when Jerry Lawler walked out, they booed the shit out of him. They hated his guts. It's like, there's a heel that can get heat and keep it. And that's a rare thing. He had more heat than anybody in the company, and all he did is give you a thumb in the throat and stuff like that. He was a great heel. it's a pretty screwed up time for Davey. He's got serious drug problems that nobody knows about, I guess, maybe Davey. All I know is that Davey gets injured, or supposedly injured. I never bought that he was injured. He supposedly got injured with a staph infection and went home, probably about the first week of July, and was off the whole summer. He was just gone. And it was too bad because I only just found out that we were working. And we had I think it was the same weekend we wrestled in Binghamton. I know I wrestled Davey. Vince had us, we had a match. They put us together just to kind of get a feel each other out match before it was Wembley. I'm thinking it was probably middle of July. I know it was just before Davey went home, but maybe it was even June. But I know I wrestled him, and it was awful. Our timing was wrong. It was a real struggle. And I remember when I came back, and Vince looked at me when I came past him. He said, "I hope it's going to be better than that at SummerSlam." And because I think we had talked earlier that night about we were going to go on last at Wembley. Now we were going to be the last match on the card. And I remember telling him, I said, "Nobody will top us. It's going to be the best match, guaranteed, on the card." And so then we had this abortion out there. And when I walked past Vince, he was like, "I hope it's going to be better than that at SummerSlam." And I was like, "I hope so too." I don't know what, and sometimes that happens when you work with each other for the first time. You try too hard, or you're both too tired. And it was at a TV taping, so we got a lot of, you do promos all day, and you can be really distracted, and it's not a good way to judge how you're going to do. So I know for me, I got real serious about the match right away. Once I knew that we were wrestling, I saw it as the opportunity to deliver the greatest match ever. That I could, if Davey followed me and listened to me, I could take him through, and we could have the best match maybe ever. We could really steal a show and really make our mark in the business. And so I would train and tan in the tanning beds, and I remember I would go in the tanning bed and I would lie down and I would envision the whole match. The first tie-up, takeover to the rest, every spot that followed, what would come up next. And if I ran into a wall, we're like, okay, what would I do next? And I'd think about it, and then I'd come up with the idea. And then, anyway, I gradually kind of put an entire match together in my head. And every time I laid down, I could start it from the beginning. It's the identical match that you watch. I mean, it's the match. And I remember going, it's perfect. I got this perfect match. I don't need to change anything. I just need to tell Davey. And I would call Davey. I called him for the whole month of August. I called him every day. And I could never get him. He was always out or never returned my calls. I talked to my sister Diana. He had some real bad drug problems at the time and was totally out of reach. And I think even when he left...
How much is Diana aware of?
I think she's pretty much got to be aware of all of it. I know that Davey, when he got on the plane, he had been up for almost 48 hours, hadn't been to sleep. He'd been on a coke binge and then barely got on the flight that flew to London. And I hadn't talked. I called and called and called, and I couldn't get an answer, couldn't get him to call me, and I kept thinking, I don't know what the hell he's doing. He should talk to me just so I can tell him what's going on, and I'm trying to help him, I'm trying to make him. The match is all about putting him over. And I remember when I saw him in the dressing room in Wembley, we had to do interviews the day before. All the interviews, the one about I think I said something about London Castle or something like that on my promo. That was all done the Saturday. They're all done the day before the promos for the show of the SummerSlam. Okay. And I was so mad at him, and I pulled him aside, and I said, I've been trying to call you for 2 months. Where the hell you been? And then he just confessed to me that he hadn't slept since he got there, and he was a wreck, and he hadn't trained, he hadn't lifted weight, and he was out of shape, and he was a wreck. And he confessed to me that he was gonna stink the next day. Then he was gonna, and I started telling him the match. I said, this is what I want to do. And I started to sit down. I said, and then we're going to do this and this. And I told him the whole match. And he was like, he knew that I had finally, I brought, I was like Beethoven, I brought him the music sheet, and he was like, he knew it was going to be this great match, but I don't think he thought he could do it. But I laid it all out to him, and I went over and over with him that night in the dressing room until he left and went home, went to his hotel, and I got there the next day, and we went over it and went over it and went over it, and even then, as soon as we tied up in the ring, I remember, I think it was the very first spot we did. I took him over in a side headlock or something, and he goes, "I'm fucked. I'm fucked." He couldn't remember anything. He was like blank. And that's one of the only matches where you see Bret Hart talking on it, where you never catch Bret Hart talking in his matches, but you will catch me in Wembley. And it's like, because I had such a great match in my head, and I had to communicate it to him, and a lot of times you just had to call it, and you had to just, you know, which I hate doing. I hate wrestlers that I see him talking. And to me, it's an automatic fail for that. But with Davey, I had to do it, and I did a pretty good job of masking it for most of it. But
were you confident that you could pull this off, especially the day before when you see him and he's telling you he's in no condition? Are you shitting?
No, I was furious at him. I couldn't believe it. There's a chance of his lifetime, and I'm willing to. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to launch him as high as I can. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to get Davey, make sure he's, you know, as far as I know, he's getting the belt and he's going to get this big push. And it's going to be maybe he's going to be the next champion. Maybe this is his final, you know, I was all gung-ho for him, and I really wanted to see him rise to the occasion. And you know what, he did rise to the occasion. You know, that's the thing about it, is I tell all this to people when they go, oh, so they lose a little respect for Davey, and fair enough, you can. But the truth is that he sucked it up, and he did every spot. He did everything, and he showed it. And at the very end, you know, I paced him well enough, and I can remember he's power slamming me at the end, press slamming me over his head, and suplexing me, and you know, he got everything done, and I take great credit. I think it was my greatest match in the sense that I carried someone for about 42 minutes of a 45-minute match, and then you can barely tell. Maybe only now you can tell, but I think that's why it makes it more important to watch, is because, you know, he was a train wreck that day, and for a long time, and I know in Davey's case, he's always said it was the greatest match he ever had, and I think it was one of the greatest matches of all time, for sure.
Was your dropping to him exclusively to free you up for the world title spot? No.
In fact, I don't think anybody saw it but me. I understood the dynamics of everything. It's hard to say all this now or make people believe that you knew what you were doing, but I had a crystal clear vision. All I wanted to do was the ladder match or this Wembley match, either one of them. I just wanted to have one more classic, beautiful match that would just launch me up there. So I would have had Perfect, I would have had Piper, I would have had Davey, or it could be whoever it is, but I want to have one more big match, and that would sort of, I think, would tip me over as far as being a star, like would give me a real push. And so it was a big night for me, and I knew that I was, in those days, you know, a lot of people, everyone thinks they're the most over guys, and everyone thinks that they should be champion, everyone thinks they're the greatest worker, you know. But the truth is that for me, I knew crystal clear, that I was the most over guy in England and Germany and Europe. I don't know what it is about what I had over there, but it was, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it for any other wrestler. And I think wrestlers today forget what it was like for me back then. But it was like Beatlemania for me when I got off the bus. I got stampeded, I got fondled, I got dragged down by old women and young girls and fondled. And I mean, this is in the buildings, on the bus, everywhere I went, on the hotel lobbies. It was crazy. I mean,
more so than here.
Oh, nothing like here. Wow. Like, it was insane. It was, I remember Chief Jay Strongbow one time when I went to Germany, say 91 or so, I wrestled Dino Bravo. All right, well, actually, I don't know who I wrestled. I wrestled somebody. I remember he put me on first match. I was Intercontinental Champion. And he goes, "You're on first." I go, "Don't put me on first." I said, "I'm really over here. Like, it's like this, they were going to wait all night for me." And even then, that night when I got off the bus, was one of the first times I got sort of, malt or Beatlemania, and I remember going, don't send me out first. And I pleaded with him. I said, please, I'm telling you, it's a big mistake. And he goes, no, you're on first. Put me out. I went out first, and they stampeded and knocked me over. And then when I had my match, same thing, they tackled me, and all the security guards that were walking me back, we all got knocked down, and it took about 10 minutes to peel me through the crowd. And I remember I came back to the curtain, and there was girls hanging on my neck and lipstick everywhere, and it was like I wasn't in a lot of pain or anything, but it was nothing like I've ever seen for anyone else. And I say that with all sincerity. And I remember when I came through, and he said, "I'll never put you on last again, not over here. Yeah, I'll never do that again." And it was like I was on last, and every show I ever wrestled in England or Germany was sold out, or Brussels or Belgium or Italy. I don't know about Italy. There was good houses, but not. But Germany, every show I ever worked was sold out. England, the tour was always sold out. Whenever I was on the tour, it was like it was Bret Hart world over there. I don't even think Vince grasped what was going on there for me. I remember telling him, I said, "You really need to get a film crew and film it so you know what it is." And I remember they sent a film crew over, and I don't know what they ever did with the footage, but they put me in a bunch of East German towns, so it wasn't quite the same. But still, going back to the point is that I was so over in England and Germany, more than anyone else. And it was on a special level that I've never seen, even now. And I knew that when I walked into the ring with Davey Boy in Wembley Stadium, that we were just a match on the card. The whole time we were just a match on the card. And I know people wanted to see Bulldog and they wanted to see me, but you know, you want to see Warrior, you want to see Macho Man, you want to see Ric Flair, you want to see all Undertaker. There's lots of guys on the card you want to see. But I knew that when I went out last and delivered the match that I was locked in my head for 2 months to deliver, that when I lost to Davey with that finish that I used, it's such a such a great finish. It's so, there's no way out. You're locked, you're pinned. It's like so slow and dramatic. 1, 2, 3, and it's like even when I watch it now, when you kick out, it's very dramatic ending. And I knew as soon as they get the 3 count, I knew right then and there that there's going to be so many people are going to be, they're such big Bret Hart fans, they're going to feel really lousy that it was such a good match, and I lost. Mm-hmm. And I said there's going to be a rebound. There's going to be a second. There's going to be such a bounce back from people won't want to see me having lost, especially the way I left the ring. Kind of like you know, I thought it was really well done, but I just I knew there was going to be a sympathy factor that would play in huge for me. I didn't think I would necessarily win the title, the world title, but I knew that I was going to be more over. Okay. After I lost the belt to Davey, I would be more over than him. I would be more over than I was as champion.
Interesting.
And I was.
How do you feel the company's doing marketing you with stuff like this, and sunglasses, the video game?
I was probably, I think, just glad to get anything I could. You know, you're always, you know, the real truth is that you're never really in until you get marketed. Like, you got no real power until the power is when Vince invests in you. It's like, it's one thing when you say, okay, well, I'm going to quit, I'm going to go home. Like, it's like, well, wait a minute, we got how many $1 million invested in Bret Hart T-shirts and sunglasses, and he's on the boxes of this and that, and he's, you know, packaging, and it's like, wait a minute, let's talk, you know, because they don't want you to go. That's when you have power, and that's when you start to notice it. And in those days, it was like, just put me on a box, or give me a toy, or give me something, you know. And I was getting a little bits and pieces, and finally a T-shirt, and finally, you know, little odds and ends here and there. It was a really slow climb for me. Right. But once they started that big wheel, like that big company, Vince started really pushing you on your own records, and you got a song coming out, and you got all kinds of stuff happening. That's when you start to feel like, okay, now I can relax a little. I don't have to worry about my job all the time. I don't have to worry I'm going to get fired.
Are you starting to see some decent money from merch?
Yeah, I think so. And in time, huge money. I think the sunglasses were huge. I think they were one of the cheapest things to make, and I know for sure they're the biggest seller merchandise-wise for years. Like, for what they cost to make and what they were selling them for was nothing but profit.
Talking about a talented guy, he could do anybody's voice in the locker room. Hawk, Savage, I mean, you close your eyes, you think they were there. And he was also a talented enough wrestler that he could do their moves too. And I've wanted to have somebody do this gimmick since this is before ECW, you know, before you even,
Right.
where somebody who could do that would keep getting knocked out, and ended up doing Matt Striker eventually, but
Right.
I'd come, wake up, and think he was that other person. And I said, Terry, because he's going to go to Vince and say, you've got to do this. You've got to go in there and say, this is the gimmick. You wrestle Savage as Savage. You wrestle Rude as Rude. It's a natural for you. Of course, you know, he just got there. He didn't want to say too much about anything, you know, impresses, you know.
It became paltry.
Yeah, but meanwhile, what he did do, and I guess I should have taken it as a comment at the time. I was insulted by it and angry by it, but that's so stupid. I was drawing 220 people, and they're drawing 20,000. But the last show I was there, that show, I did an angle which I had never seen done before. Okay? I had Hot Body against Stetson on a long-running feud. Match ends, double DQ, they fight to the back. Bob Ortiz, the ring announcer, nobody knows what's going to happen here. He announces the next match. Ladies and gentlemen, next match is a tag team match. Tag team. They got 3-4 minutes into the match. And everybody's completing the match. They come back out of the dressing room. Hot Body's got a toilet seat around his neck going, and the place went nuts. And I knew it would if only I could have done it on a grander scale. Doesn't he go to WWF, and 2 weeks later on Monday Night Raw, Flair and Hennig did it.
Right.
I called it Terry, his Todd. Come on. It was look how look at the reaction. That's not an insult to you. That's a comment to you. You did it in front of the tournament, and he was right. And I got my panties in the budget 1 minute. I was like, how do you do that? My angle was just Todd. Any angles, nobody's angle anymore. The angle's been done. Right. Everybody's got, you know, has a carte blanche to it. And he was right.
That's true.
But it was only 2 weeks later. I said, damn, you know, I did it in front of 200 people. There's like 15,000 people popping for this angle. It's like, I don't know. That was something that was, I love doing something that hadn't been done before. That was very important to me.
Yeah.
Every now and then when I could.
Now, him against Snuka, no mistake here that they're, no coincidence here, I should say. They're rekindling their WWF feud. And
Morocco came to me because he was friendly with Bob Ortiz from when he had worked for Joel Goodhart. And they became friends. I guess he stayed at Bob's house because Joel couldn't afford hotel rooms. And Bob said to me, Todd, Morocco really wants to come in. His wife works for the airlines. So his airline, all his flying is free. You never buy him a ticket. All you got to do is pay him. What does he want? You know, I get 2 shows that weekend. What did you do for it? And by the way, at this time, or like even the biggest stars like Morocco, none of them were getting more than $500 for a show. Like today, you know, middle stream TV guys are getting $1,000 or $1,500 in the independent circuit.
Right.
But back then it was, you know, so if you get them for like $700 for 2 shows, I always try to combine the two. Now it sort of paid for itself a little bit, and they were draws. And Morocco and Snuka, come on, absolute draws. Sure. But and when he came in, he would stay at Bob's, so I didn't pay for his hotel room either.
So this would have been, you knew even at this point that you could comfortably put the title on him because he's someone you'd be able to use again and again. Okay.
Again, my idea being, though, he was going to give it to Sandman. I had always had planned to be the Beach Bum and the Sandman.
Right.
That was going to be my natural transition there.
Gotcha.
And sadly enough, when it's supposed to happen, Peaches, his wife, is supposed to throw powder in Morocco's face. Peaches is holding the thing in her hand for like God knows how long now. Her hand's sweating like a pig. She throws it, it just goes, shh, and Morocco goes, oh my God. It was the worst finish. I thought to myself, he's a pro. He should have known not to sell that. Come on, like alternative in the ring, call something else. Right. Oh my God. I mean, the fans are like, really? Really, Morocco? There's 200 people that hear a word that be said. Are you kidding me? Oh God. This is a crazy giant club on Delaware Avenue here. And it's indoor and outdoor club. And outdoors they have like 2 stories with a spiraling not staircase.
Balcony.
Yeah, what do you call it? It's a guardrail, but it's not a guardrail, it's a fence. And all the way to the bottom down there is a little pool. Not very deep, it's not like a swimming pool, but it's just for decorative purposes. And Jimmy comes up with the idea, brah, how about I do the bump into the pool? I go, are you kidding me? He goes, no, brother, I'm telling you. He knocked me down. I take the bump into the pool. He come in the pool after me. Pump, 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 pump. Ba-boom, ba-boom.
Jimmy's known for the splash.
Yeah,
So.
AJ says, right. AJ Petruzzi, who's the Super D, says, whatever you say, Jimmy, you're the man, Jimmy. He looked up to Jimmy. He was an answering guy for Vince. So we're in the match. Very end of the match, all of a sudden he's at the top of the thing, right? He's supposed to jump. And I see him standing there, unlacing his boot, while Jimmy's down there, like, waiting for him, like, you coming? He goes, I can run up there. I go, AJ, what are you doing? He goes, I'm not going to ruin my wrestling boots and get them all wet. I said, oh, AJ. So he's there for 5 minutes while AJ's unlacing his boots.
Selling in the pool.
Right, Jimmy's still in the pool selling. AJ's unlacing his boots at the top before he goes into the water. I'm like, oh, my God. Those were the days.
John Finnegan also takes a spill in the pool here. Here's a fixture all the way through ECW. Talk about John for a minute.
John Finnegan was a fixture through ECW, through PW, through Jazz. I would never do a show without John Finnegan. I love John Finnegan. He was the most underrated son of a bitch in the history of this business, I swear to God. He was such a good referee, so talented. He could run a dressing room, he never had the opportunity to. He got the business like nobody. He'd be out there, he knew when it was looking like shit. He said, guys, keep it moving, you're dying out here, you're killing me. He knew how to run the ring. He was like a general in there. And as he got older and more mature, he became more and more like that. He was such a... If you ever watch his expressions, he sells when someone takes a bump. Like he got hurt, phenomenal. He knows the bump's coming, but he looks more shocked than anybody else in the building. Like he's just that good, and it comes natural to him. He was just we had other guys who were referees. No, Molyneux, this one, but Finnegan, I would never want to run a show without Finnegan. He was far and away the finest referee I ever met, and also a fine gentleman.
Are people really questioning whether...
It was a gradual, yeah, it was gradual. And it was the same thing as the last one. It was like another, I don't know that it's always necessary to clue everyone in, but at the same time I thought that it was like, it was pretty clear. It's pretty clear what it is. So I guess they're just trying to come up with a definition for them, or, I think there was a sort of sense that wrestling was entertainment, and I don't know. It was kind of it fits in with what their thinking was at the time.
Who the hell is Steve Planamenta? Do you know?
It's a suit and tie guy.
Right. Hate those
guy
guys.
that didn't know anything about wrestling.
Is that true?
No, he didn't know it. Zero. I know who he was. He may have been good for whatever department he was in, but he knew about as much about wrestling as I know about rocket science.
There weren't a lot of mixed tags back at this time. What was your decision to do that? Did you think that it had the potential, A, to come off as too hokey? If
there was a stripper named Tigra.
Yes, there was.
She worked at
the cabaret.
The cabaret.
Yes.
She's a cabaret. She said, "I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to be part of it. I like this." So I came up with the idea of putting her with JT, and since Damon already had Peaches, because Damon and JT had a feud going from all the way back in the TWA days. They worked together a lot. I thought they could coach the girls through it and let them rumble around. Guys always there's the cat fight, obviously, and so that was the thought behind bringing her in.
The male on female violence, which happened in ECW down the road, which today would be a big deal and wasn't a big deal then. Was it on your mind that it could potentially be a big deal?
In terms of
men hitting women
negatively, you mean?
Yes.
No. It was a work. They weren't. I mean, when Tommy Dreamer lifts the fan seat up and her skirt comes down, everyone's looking at her panties and goes to give her a pile driver. He's not going to put her head through the mat. He's going to protect
the perception
her.
of.
But that was what made it shocking.
Right.
The idea was, anybody could do what's been done over and over and over again. How do you get them? The only way I can think of is to give them something they haven't seen before. Like, wait, did you see that? He just hit a girl. Well, something different happened at that show they had never seen before. That's what I was shooting for there.
Is he just doing this as an on-air gimmick, or does he have an office role at this point? Slaughter.
I think it's just an on-air gimmick. He may have become an agent, but even then I don't recall that he was an agent. He may have become an agent. I don't think so.
Okay.
No, and I think it was just a storyline.
Former workers that do become agents, is there a transition that happens from the kind of cat they were as a wrestler?
Well, you got to have the right guys for that job, for sure. The agents, Vince gave him a fair bit of authority and power, and he backs his agents. I don't think it wasn't a position handed down lightly. They didn't just pick anyone to be agents. But I think you got to have the right guys, like the guys that I think of being good agents. Like Rene Goulet was a great agent because he was one of the boys. He was one of the wrestlers once upon a time, and he knew what it was like to be on the road, and he knew what it was like when we have a bad travel day, and he could be more understanding and logical about simple things. Whereas some guys...
Let's say Tony Garea, for example.
Tony, I thought, was the same thing. He was a good guy to have as an agent because he didn't really have an axe to grind.
Strongbow?
Strongbow was one of the best.
Steele?
Steele was one of the worst. George Steele was one of those kind of guys. I remember George Steele doing lines of coke and partying with everyone else, and then like a week later or a couple of weeks later they made him an agent, and he was just like one of the prisoners that got turned into one of the guards, and he was just a motherfucker, man. He was not a good guy at all. He was always fine. He fined my brother Owen in Berserker one time. We were 1 minute late in Hershey Park one time when I was champion, right after I won the belt. I remember Owen and Berserker were riding with me just because I was give him a free ride to the, I never charged for trans. When we got there, we were laughing, we were taking our time, we were getting coffees and stuff like that, and walking the dress room. And George Scott's like this, and he goes, "It's 6:32 or something like that," and I go, "So?" He goes, "You're 2 minutes late." I go, "Really?" He goes, "I gotta fine you." He fined all of us $500 each.
And that would hold up with Vince in the office if George Steele did that?
I was champion. I was supposed to set an example for the rest of the company. I'm on last. I'm there at 6:32. I go, "This is bullshit." Rene Goulet or Chief Jay Strongbow or any of them, none of them would ever do something like that. But George Steele, And I need to tell the end of that story is that I remember my brother Owen and Macho Man. I can actually tell this story now. They took his Halliburton, if he's ever wondered whatever happened to us, his Halliburton. He had locked up with his passport and his colostomy bags and his pills and everything else, and there's airplane tickets. And I remember Owen him and Randy snuck it out under a jacket to the car, and later on that night, an hour later after we left the building, I remember when we were driving over a bridge in somewhere like New Rochelle or something like that, and he opened the window and threw it out, and it went sailing over into the river, Manhattan River or something like that. But I just remember George Scott. I always wondered, why would someone do that to such a good guy? But he, you know,
George Steele.
George Steele.
George Scott.
I'm sorry, George Steele. And he was not a good guy. He was a snitch.
The events leading up to this, when are you told? Who tells you? Who lays it out for you?
It's funny. I didn't write about all this in my book, but I was up to a lot of no good in those days.
On what level?
Well, I had we weren't supposed to change our tickets, and I had changed my ticket to visit some girl in Italy, which was I don't know how that happened, but I ended up going to Italy and visiting some girl that I barely knew, and toured around Italy for a few days, and then flew back to Canada, and no one really knew any different. Just thought it was just on tour. But I remember I had changed my ticket before I left, and then Vince handed out a memo in the dressing room that said that anyone that changes their ticket, it's a $2,000 fine and something. It was a big fine. I remember going, holy. And so then I went to Vince. I said, I just got this memo. I said, I already changed my ticket. And I told Vince, I said, I'm going to visit a friend of mine that plays hockey over in Italy. I've already made plans to change my ticket. And he said, don't worry about it. Or, you know, I don't think you need to worry about it. I'll look into it or something. Anyway, so when I got home, I think I went on the road for 1 or 2 days, or 3 or 4 days, like a short tour, and then I went home, came back home to Calgary. And they called me up, and the first town we were in was Red Deer, and then Saskatoon. And I think Red Deer was on a Sunday. And they called me up and told me that I needed to fly to Saskatoon on Monday morning, and that I could not change my ticket. Like, whatever you do, don't change your ticket. And when you get off the airplane, you go straight to the dressing room and you find Vince. He wants to see you. He's got something he wants to talk to you about. I didn't know what it was. I remember thinking, I'm in trouble for my ticket, changing my ticket. I really thought that's what it was, and I thought I might be in big trouble, bigger trouble than maybe I really got. I'm in like hot water. And I really didn't, I should have got that I might be getting the belt. When I think about it, there was lots of clues and lots of things that made me think, you know, I think someone had told me before I left for that trip to Italy or Germany, it was Chief Jay Strongbow had pulled me aside and said that Vince has got a list with 5 names on it or something like that. I'm not sure the list, how many names were on the list, but he said, and yours is one of them to be the next champion. They're looking for a new champ, and he goes, I put in a word for you, and I think a couple of different guys said they thought I should get it, and he told me, he said, don't fuck up. When you go over to Europe, don't fuck up, because they're taking a long look at you right now. So. And
you book a fucking flight.
So I'd already did all that. It was done. It was, and I came home, and I remember I flew that day to Saskatoon. I had to get up at like 5:30 in the morning, catch a 8. I think it was a 7 o'clock flight or something like that. And I remember thinking, this is so crazy. And no one was even going to be at the building at 8 in the morning or whenever I got there. I got there really early, and it's only an hour flight from Calgary, and straight to the arena, straight to the, right like they told me, straight in, walking down, and I go down the hall, and I think somebody was there, maybe one of the other agents, or somebody told me that, just to wait a minute, Pat, that Vince was with Rick. And so then I saw Rick come out of Vince's office, and I saw Rick thank him and shake his hand, and he was real courteous and real respectful and real professional, and he walked down the hall, and then I remember Vince looking back up the other hall and waved me down, and I remember thinking, okay, what's going on here? And I still didn't know. And I got in, and I did write about this in my book, though, because Vince starts up with me, where he starts talking to me, and did a quite convincing job of making me sound like he's going to fire me. He talked about how he asked me how long I've been with the company, and I think I told him whatever many years it was, and he goes, well, we've tried everything with you. We've tried to put you in tags, and we put the tag belts on you, and we put the Intercontinental belt on you, and he goes, heck, we've done just about everything we can think of to do with you. And I remember looking at him, and you think that I would realize that he was playing with me, or that I was winning the title or something, but I didn't. And I remember thinking, this cold-hearted bastard's going to fire me when he's got my dad flying in to be the referee in my match tonight. And he was going to be on my corner that night when the match, me and Davey were supposed to be tagged up with my dad in my corner. And I thought, oh, he's not going to fly my dad out and fire me on the same day. And I remember thinking, I thought, yeah, he would. He would fire me. And I'm looking at him like, part of me is looking at him like real stone-faced, and I'm not reacting at all. I really thought he was going to say, and so we're going to have to let you go, or something. We've done everything we can. I know it sounds crazy to think that I could actually believe that, but I expected it almost like something's going to burst my bubble. Here it comes, and he goes, that's why we're going to put the title on you tonight. And I remember I looked at him and I said, okay. I didn't say anything. I didn't have any reaction. I didn't smile or jump for joy or anything. And of course I was inside, but I didn't know if it was real or not. And then he said to me, he goes, I can't believe it. You got to say something. You're not even happy or anything. And I was like, so I'm just, digesting it, But anyway, so he had a good laugh at almost firing me kind of thing, and the fact that I didn't sell it. I think he was always, I don't know how many wrestlers he told they were going to win the belt, but when he told me, I didn't give him any kind of reaction at all. I was like, and what else are you going to do for me?
This match is only made available on home video. Why?
I'll never know. I'll never ever understood. Never understood then. I don't think there was any problem from Flair. I never ever heard there was, and I think Vince assured me that Rick had no problems with any of it, and thought I was a real pro, and Rick didn't say anything, had no squawking, or at least that's what Vince told me, and I believe him. And so I don't know. Maybe that was Vince's decision. I'll never know. I don't know the answer.
That's odd. Does one's relationship with Vince change when you are his title holder?
Yeah, it did. And I remember I was told to get real close to Vince, that to try to become his best friend if I can, or really, and Vince told me that the standard thing, he said, I want you to call me every day. And I said, about what? And he goes, just call me every day. I always want to talk to my champion every day. But anyway, it was really, so I would call him every day, and it's like, I'm calling you like you asked me to. I don't know what you want me to tell you, but I often wonder if it's like, I guess this is where I'm supposed to stooge out a bunch of guys, and say, okay, what I think, this guy's no good, and what I heard, and I never ever did.
But he was never asking you stuff like that.
Never asked me, but he wanted me to call him every day, and after a while I just stopped calling him. Because I was like, I got nothing to say. I don't know what you want to know. I mean, I see you every few days anyway, But I didn't tend to call anybody up just to talk about stuff and talk about I did call them up and talk about what I was doing. And I had no problems with them. Most of the time, everything they told me was fun anyway. Like I never had any. It's probably the same for John Cena today when they come in and they tell him, like, this is what you're doing, John, And it's like I was cool with everything they were doing, especially once I won the title. Like, even that day, waiting the whole day to win the title, I just kept thinking, who's going to mess this up for me? And I always think, I'm glad they didn't tell me the week before, or even a couple weeks before, or months ahead. Nobody knew. Nobody saw it coming, and I think every wrestler, even the ones that liked me, would have stabbed me in the back and made sure that I just always felt like it's such a dog-eat-dog that a lot of guys would say, he can draw, he's not the guy, or that Bret Hart, there was a lot of people like that anyway.
But once you got the title, isn't there a target automatically hung on your back at this point, as far as someone trying to get your spot?
Yeah, like once that whole day passed, I remember just waiting, and I didn't really believe it till it happened. And that's for me, like me, that was the greatest day of my life, I think. You know, and I always got to, like, people say, why would you go back and work for Vince? It's like, that's why, because the guy gave me a chance in the first place, and you wouldn't be talking to me now if it wasn't for what Vince did for me then, and I'll never forget it. But he took a chance on me. I think when a lot of guys would argue strongly that I was not the right guy to put the belt on, didn't have the star power that he was looking for. But I really do think that Vince loved my work. He loved my matches, and he loved, for most of the time that I was champion, around that time period, and maybe a little after that, and through the rest of my, till I left, most of the time he would tell me, I don't want to know the finish. Just show me. I just want to watch. He's gonna sit back and watch my match like a fan. Yeah. And I like that about Vince. Vince was a real fan of wrestling, and I think that's how he evolved. You know, eventually sort of moved to my way of wrestling or thinking.
I had never, first of all, I didn't know I was going to take a backbreaker. How about that? All right. So we're talking about this. We want to turn Jimmy heel. Was he champ then? No.
No, this was going to be the turn, and no, it was Morocco. Morocco went over Snuka that night as well.
Okay, so we're turning Jimmy heel because Morocco was a baby face at this point, I guess. And how do we turn him heel? Well, he could beat up all the wrestlers in the back, and everybody would go like, "Yes, you're God, Snuka." I mean, at that time, you know, there was nobody there that he could take out that would be shocking. I had never been touched in the ring. No one never put their hands on me at that point. You know, we're doing I don't know how many shows at this point. I said, "Well, how about this?" And I came up with this idea. I said, "How about we pretend, you know, this guy's he's going to hit me. You save me." I go, "That's right, my man." And it turns out then you hit me. And I think he's just going to hit me. You know, I'm not going to do the hit, lay down. That's going to be the end of it. So I don't remember how he did it, but I think he hit me. I went down. I was like, I'm going up in the air. I'm going up in the air. He just put me right in the air. I mean, I weighed a lot less then, but still, he just and did it. And I think he did it a second time. And okie dokie. I said, he's climbing the ropes. He's supposed to just hit me the one time. He's climbing the ropes. I go, I'm going to die now. I closed my eyes, literally, as he was coming off that top rope. I said, oh, God, don't let me die of this. I'm going, did he do it yet? Did he do it yet? That's how light Jimmy Snuka is. I was amazed. I said, I'm laying there and I'm still, like, oh, my God, I can't believe it's over. Like not a feather touched me.
Right.
And I'm watching on video, and it looks like he's stomach to stomach with me. He never touched me. I mean, it looks like he came right there. He was that talented.
Among the people that do come out in the fracas that Snuka attacks, one of them is the Metal Maniac.
Yes, the Metal Maniac was basically Jimmy's laundress. You know, he traveled around with him and did his laundry for him, washed his underwear since the wife wasn't traveling with him anymore. And then Jimmy would get him put on shows and like an extra. Nice enough guy, but I'll tell you one of my favorite Jimmy Snuka stories. We're at that very building, the Chester Cabaret. We're sitting in the dressing room, and he goes, kid. And the Maniac's like, yeah, Jimmy. And he goes, kid, get some color tonight. He goes, want me to color? He goes, yeah. You know, color. He goes, don't worry, I'll zip you. He's like, you sure, Jimmy? I mean, there's only like 200 people out there. He goes, come on. He goes, Ivan, because I was on that same show. Uncle Ivan. You got a blade on you? He called like this. And he must have already given him the Iggy, because call off because I just got one, but it's rusty. So now you see the Maniacs going like, oh, fuck. He doesn't look like a pussy around the whole dressing room. You know, Jimmy, I mean, we should build up to something like that. You know what I'm saying? We can make a whole angle. He goes, no, brother, trust me. This is the way to do it, brother. So like I said, he goes, this Ivan, he goes, and he had nothing in his hand. He goes, right. Yeah, we good, brother, we good. Now this kid's shooting bullets all night long. We got to the ring, and after they were here with him, he goes with his fingernail, and he goes, "Here, my bleeding ring is." break down, brother, break down. He went, trying to make the blood come out. He never was cut. He doesn't know he's not cut. She goes, brother, break down. He's going, instead of himself, he's got like constipation. I mean, I was in the audience watching this because I knew it was coming. I couldn't wait to see the spot. I almost fell out of my chair. I was laughing so hard. He's just sitting there all by himself alone in the ring going, trying to make it trickle down. And Jimmy's like trying not to laugh in the ring. Oh, God.
Fantastic.
True story.
You have old-time Philly sportscaster and actually WWF announcer for the Spectrum shows, Dick Graham.
Mm-hmm.
How does that come about?
Dick Graham came about because we were going to get TV. And I needed somebody, to play-by-play, and his experience. He and Cal Rudman, and we're doing all the Spectrum shows. Cal Rudman I knew through the charity. He was on my board of directors at the Variety Club. Okay. He had this thing called the Monday Morning Quarterback. It was a musical for the music industry. And Cal was like a big name in the music industry. Like if he said you're a hit, it's gonna be a hit. That's it. Yeah. He would listen to a rock and roll record. Kid, it's gotta be a hit. He was an older guy too.
He was a radio guy, right?
No, he had a sheet, a music sheet, like you would have like a dirt sheets.
The newsletter?
Something like that, yeah, but whatever, and he would say, this is going to be good, and whatever he said, that's really what the stations all followed. You play that record because Cal told him to.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was that kind of thing. And
how does he find wrestling?
He liked it, like anybody else. From the time I'm this big, 5 years old, it's either in you or it's not. It's as simple as that. Sure. Some people are going to go, what kind of garbage is this? Even with their kids. And some people are like, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. I had my father going, how do you watch that crap? He's not really throwing salt in his eyes. I go, yes, he is. Tanaka's throwing salt in his eyes. You crazy? Leave me alone. Kill Fuji. That kind of thing. And he would say, I can't stand that you watch that stuff. We'd fight about it. It's either in you or it's not.
So Cal becomes a board member of the
He's a board member of Variety Club.
Organization.
Variety Club. And then he says to me, I hear you're doing wrestling. Does that mean to come? I said, he was the weak link there, so to speak, that little Prism on Prism TV. And I said, well, I'd like to use Dick Graham. Is he a local guy? He goes, yeah, he's ready. I can give you his number. So I called him up and he goes, I'd love to do it. Wow. But then he was sort of like, even then, because again, we weren't even really hardcore yet, but we were doing some things. And he was like, I don't think I've ever seen that before. He was a little taken aback, but he did he did a nice job for a little while.
Does anyone peg him as a future world champion?
I don't know about world champion. I pegged him as a. First of all, I don't know of a Samoan wrestler then or now or ever that wasn't a really good worker. They're all good workers. Yoko was a really good athlete. He was 600 pounds, but he could move like a cat. He was like one of the most agile guys, and he was never stiff. He was always a real pro in the ring, and moving that kind of weight around and dropping that kind of weight on different wrestlers, and it can be dangerous stuff, and it can be no fun if they don't know what they're doing. He was always a pro.
I was going to say, it's almost impossible not to get hurt with someone. How do you?
Yeah, especially let me put it this way: someone like Vader, no fun to work with, no fun to come back beat up every night from working with a guy like that, and as opposed to working with a guy like Yoko or Bam Bam. Big guys that were so careful and delicate and so respectful of your body and their weight and how to fall on you and do the things that they did to you. There's two guys right there, Bam Bam and Yoko, during my time period were great talents, great workers. Yoko was I wished he could have been, 250. He would have been a great athlete. He would probably been a football player.
You decide to keep this going. Why? Just to feed into the heeldom?
Because really, he did not have any strong enough baby faces that the crowd would get behind. At the time, the people who were the fans of the promotion, who not only started with Joel, but even the newer ones we brought along as we were starting to grow a little bit, they were so thankful and appreciative of this promotion. I can't put it into words or do it justice. What it's like to walk out of a show and people running over saying, thank you, oh my God. There was so much more enjoyable. Anything I've seen on TV now in the last 6 months or the last year, that was a thank you. Because you don't know what it means to us to have a promotion like this, and it's in our backyard. It's everything. And they were so behind everything that they were, I was like their big baby face.
What's the makeup of the fans at this point? I'm assuming it's not the bloodthirsty bingo hall dwellers.
Well,
so
some of them were.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some of them, like I guess Hat Guy, people like that who ended up in the front row who were there from day one. Were there from before I even started. It wasn't until people started trading tapes that really jumped it up. But at this time, I was sadly enough like probably our biggest baby face, even though I wasn't a worker or working in the ring. So in order to make him more heelish at that time, because no one ever hit authority figures yet. I mean, that hadn't been done yet with Vince or Bischoff or anybody. That gave it more of a, oh my God, kind of feeling in the audience, as long as we didn't overdo it.
The heel chant that we began to hear here is Piper, Piper, when Snook is out there. It's inconceivable that you didn't give any thought to bringing in Roddy Piper.
I called Roddy Piper, are you kidding me? I said, Roddy, listen, I got Snook and Morocco here. Who's missing from this picture? It's got to be you. I'd love to bring you in. Would you be, what kind of money would you be looking for? Would you be willing to come do it? And he was still pretty healthy then. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, Todd, let me tell you something. I don't know you, you don't know me, but you got two of the best in the business there right now. I'm an expense you don't need, and to be honest with you, you can't afford. Because I live in Portland, tickets going to cost X amount of dollars to come back and forth. I'm going to want this amount to work. I know independent shows draw. I know what they bring in money-wise because, it's just a loss leader. You're just going to lose your ass if you do that. Right. Because, but you got two of the top guys, he said to me, so stick with them and run with them.
Let's go into fantasy for a minute. What would he have wanted? What would have?
I think they were getting, like I said, $400 to $500 a shot, and he was looking for $1,500 back then, and that was back then. Right. But he was the number one star, out of the WWF back then, as big as Hogan was. So.
You know what? Kamala was a huge guy, not a big guy. He was like one of the biggest guys you'll ever see in wrestling. Real agile. He had a certain sort of fixed style, what he did, But he was also a guy that didn't mind flying for a guy my size, that, had no problems trying to make you a star. Or he had no problem with a guy like me or Shawn Michaels or... to me, he was a great monster heel. He probably had better days back when he was working with Hogan and that. Mm. But he was always a fun guy to work with, always a night off. I always walk in, it was like Bret Hart, Kamala, was like, this is it. Wow. Just wait for my match, it'll be so easy. You're an automatic underdog. You get the sympathy factor so easy, and he's one of the easiest, lightest, most fun guys you can work with. Always a night off.
Do you think Matt got the most out of what they gave him?
Yeah, if anything, I thought he had a lot more left in him. He was a really good... he was the best clown for sure. I thought the gimmick was a great gimmick. I loved the clown gimmick. I thought the Doink the Clown was a genius gimmick. And Matt was the perfect guy. He was the creepy clown that like all the rest of the guys they had after that, they tried, but there was only one Doink, and that was Matt Bourne. He was an old pro, and he was a bit of a rascal anyway, so you know, he really fit being a cigar with or being a clown with the cigar stub hanging out of his mouth. And he was a creepy, carny kind of clown, kind of character that I loved it. I remember Davey had a problem working with Matt or Doink. I mean, I'm not fucking working with a clown and all this stuff. But I was like, he's the hottest guy in the company. He's going to be the hottest heel. And I said, you're crazy not to work with him. You know, he ended up leaving the company not long after that, Davey, because he was not happy about working with Doink. And Doink was, you know, Davey was, like I say, he had his drug problems and a lot of problems back then, but he was not up on his thinking as far as what potential Matt had. Another gimmick that I thought was a great gimmick was that Santa Claus gimmick. Balls Mahoney had.
Santa Claus, yeah.
That was a great gimmick. I wish they just kept it. Like if he stayed on, and because Balls Mahoney was actually a really good worker, or at least entertaining worker to watch. And the Santa Claus gimmick, a dirty, creepy clown, like they did a movie with a creepy clown. Watching Balls Mahoney was way more fun than the movie was. All of it added up. All of it, like the Hogan, the Ring Boys, and all the stars, all the steroids. When you cleaned wrestling out, like if you look at WrestleMania 8, Legion of Doom, Warrior, Hogan, Psycho Sid, Warlord, Barbarian, like you just name all the guys. Everyone's ripped, all muscle-bound guys. A year later, you look at Survivor Series when I'm wrestling, not even a year, 6 months later or 5 months later, I'm wrestling Shawn at Survivor Series. It's 230 pounders wrestling in the main event, and everyone on the cards was under 230 pounds. Or most of them anyway, and everything changed. We're all smaller guys, clean, no big muscle guys. Everything kind of, wrestling fans, the business changed in a negative way. What was left was just the wrestling fans. The ones that were sort of, you know, your sort of part-time wrestling fans. The ones that got into it because it was a fad. They all faded off, and now what you were left with is what you had. And I think that was where, you know, I think really is where I think I pulled the sword out of the stone. It was like, without realizing it, was like the wrestling fans were on wrestling. They were tired of watching Hogan with this stuff and the big giant wrestlers and Warrior and Papa Shango and the Voodoo. And it reached a point where it was like, enough. We want Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect. We want Bret Hart, Roddy Piper. We want wrestling matches. We want action. We want stuff we haven't seen before. We want real wrestling. You know, it pretended to be real. And I think the shoot interviews and a lot of the direction that wrestling went all was shaped around where my thinking was on how my face-to-face interviews with Yokozuna from those days, or in the year, maybe the year coming. I don't think they started in '92, but there was the face-to-face promos and me calling him a fat tub of goo and stuff like that. And we're right beside each other, and I can remember it would kind of piss him off, but we'd get the promos. He would start saying stuff about it would get heated, and I can remember saying, "Oh, I've lost the title of this guy. I should be mad at him. I wouldn't be just talking nice about him, or you know, I hope next week you're prepared or something." You know. I said, I got to be mad, you know, and I said, I'm gonna talk like I'm really mad. This is what I would say to you if I was fighting you for real. And I think a lot of things changed around then. Like I felt that people always looked at me like, okay, let's see another classic match come out. Have you got another classic match somewhere in your? We want another match that we're gonna remember for a long time. And I tried really hard, even going from like when I beat Flair and I won the title. And the Survivor Series with Shawn. Shawn was not the worker that he was 2 years later as far as conditioning and all that. And we kind of had a nice, easy fill-in kind of. We worked hard and we had a great match, but it was nothing spectacular about it. But the Rumble with Razor, I mean, I tried really hard to give Razor the best match. And I heard the wrestling guys at NXT were watching my match with Razor Ramon and clapping for it. Someone was telling me about it a few weeks ago, and I thought, you know, it was a pretty good match. I just haven't. I don't think I've watched that match since probably the '90s, anyway.
Conflicting stories about his departure. Some say it was over money. Some say they wanted him to job to nails, and he didn't want to do that. No, neither one.
I know what happened to Warrior. I was one of the first people that got called on it. Vince called me, and because he told me, he goes, "We have to fire Davey. I've just gone to call you before I fire him to tell you that we're letting him go." He goes, "We had to let him go, and we had to let Warrior go." I was supposed to work with Warrior at the Rumble that year.
Oh, the Rumble. I thought it was going to be WrestleMania.
No, it was supposed to be the Rumble.
Okay.
And he was going to Vince said you beat him with a sharpshooter right in the middle, is what Vince told me. And I remember going, wow, that'll be huge if it happens. And then, like, it was a week later, they tell me that Warrior and Davey were buying steroids or growth hormone or something from some guy in Europe. And he was shipping it to them or something like that. But anyway, he got busted, the guy in England. Got busted. And Warrior panicked. And I remember he panicked, and without telling Davey, he called Vince and said, I just wanted, because Vince had the trial coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I'd better tell you this just in case, but this guy that we were getting our steroids from, he's got our name on a list and all that stuff. But anyway, he got busted yesterday, and they put him in jail. And anyway, he goes, there might be some kind of follow from it. And Vince goes, you guys are like toxic. You're done. You're done. And you're both fired now. And he fired Warrior, and he fired Davey, just like that. And I got the call before Davey got told. And that's how it came down, for sure. I loved working with Sean. But the thing with Sean was, the reason we weren't so fresh and it wasn't so fun working with Sean was we had wrestled each other all year. I wrestled Sean, if you look at my booking sheets, I wrestled Sean almost that entire year as Intercontinental Champion. I wrestled him and wrestled him and wrestled him. And we had great matches. And now they're putting us together at Survivor Series. It's like, like I've already wrestled Richfield Coliseum, I don't know how many times already, and with Sean. And I didn't feel any interest in it myself. It's like, it's a feeling, it's just a match. It's not, there's no build up, there's not enough time to build anything, we don't have a real feud or anything going. We didn't even have what me and Austin had at WrestleMania 13. We had that kind of, at least Austin had screwed me over every turn leading into that. But with Sean, we'd wrestle each other and had fun, great matches, but there was absolutely no spark going into that match. And there wasn't much. I'm sure a lot of people loved that match, and I still think it was a great match. I think it still holds up today for being a good match, but it's nothing compared to what we should have done or could have done for a pay-per-view.
There hadn't been any competitive between you at that point?
No, if anything, I think Sean came to me and said that he'd been having really easy matches and wasn't in the kind of shape to tear the house down with me, and that we'd have to just pace it, to give him for me not to go too hard a pace, because he would have trouble following. He hadn't been doing long matches and stuff. So we didn't really go balls to the wall, kind of like we did, say, in Anaheim, and other matches. I think even Sean probably felt after that match that we could have done a lot better if we just maybe had a few more weeks of preparation, or more build up on the TV side, and had more of an issue with each other, and more. And in hindsight, if we hadn't worked with each other like all winter and all summer, and like so many times where it didn't really have any kind of real, it didn't excite the fans, I don't think, too much either.
I got a call from a guy named Matt Radico. He was the guy who filmed our TV, the pilot and everything else, up until the time when we brought in the guys from New York as we really got big, Ron and Charlie. He said to me, Todd, he goes, you don't know me, and I do camera work. I shoot shows. No, he was my camera guy doing tapes. Actually, we were selling the tapes of the little shows, of our shows. You know, the old VHS. You know,
yeah,
whatever, sure. And he said, a guy named Sam Schroeder, somebody I met or I know, and he's the new person, head of programming at Sports Channel Philadelphia, and he needs content. You know, they're just starting this new network. You want to know if we would be interested? I said, would we be interested in having a TV show? Are you shitting me? Yeah, we'd be interested. He goes, all right, well, he wants us to do a pilot. All right, where can we do a pilot? So we knew every time we ran Tabor was a youth association, you know, boys club. And Frank Talent, who was one of the commissioners here for years, wrestling commissioner, athletic commissioner, had been contacting me about doing shows there. And I think I had done one other show there before that. So we said, you guarantee me I'm going to have 800 people there. You know, that's what I need for a crowd, for a TV taping. Sadly, there were no bleachers, so it was all flat seating, so it didn't really have that aesthetic look to it. But we did about 8-10 matches, and we were going to take the best 4 or whatever. You know, the hardest thing was explaining to these guys who've never done anything for TV before, because they're all, you know, indie guys, other than, you know, a Snuka or a Morocco, that, hey, it's got to be in and out, including your entrances, 10 minutes. And they're used to going out there and just taking the microphone and talking for half an hour before they even get started, like a super. I said, no. And so that was hard. So the ones who didn't do it, they didn't make the cut. You know, I wasn't going to edit the matches. We just went with whatever we had. And so we took the matches that fit, and there were one angle at the end, as you said, and we made the pilot. And he said, you know, can we start next week kind of thing, or next month or whatever? I said, yeah, let's do it.
Jay Sully and Stevie Wonderful. You have on commentary. Why that choice?
Stevie Wonderful was the music guy, and we were using him as a heel manager at the time also. Yes. Jay Sully, just I don't remember how we got him to how he ended up becoming an announcer. I really don't even remember that at all. He was friends with Matt Radico, I think, and he said just try him out. So we tried it out. You know, he seemed to be calling the moves, you know, amateurishly, but still well enough to better than somebody else who didn't know what they're doing. You know, like he said, everything was a big right hand. It's a big leg drop. What do you call that? I remember him with Paulie. What do you call that, Paulie? Paulie say, punch to the face. What do you call it? You know, well, everything was a big everything with it. But so he was very over the top.
Eddie Gilbert would torment him for years, bringing the booze. Did he have a drinking problem, first of all?
Never, no, he did not.
Okay.
Didn't even drink. However, at our first TV taping, Eddie came in now before we started the TV.
Right.
That's when I hired him to book. I brought him up here from Tennessee, and he helped me create the whole, you know, television show, and he'd be in the studio for, you know, editing it with Radico, et cetera. And the very first show we did, all I remember is he was coming up to, it was Snuka, Morocco, Eddie Gilbert, Paulie, I don't know if there's a fifth person or not, I can't remember the original grouping. And he goes, listen guys, just so you know, at the end of the show when you win the bell, like, don't get this tux wet.
Oh.
This is our first thing. Whatever you do, don't get this wet, because, you know, I rented it or expensive, whatever it was. So, of course, within seconds, he looked like he was a drowned. I mean, he didn't even finish a sentence. And they're, hey, Jay Sully! The whole man, what's he going to do? Say something to Mariah? He's huge. And he's going, he's like, he learned a lesson that day. Don't ever do that, because, man, you're just asking for it. And then we started coming up with the drinking idea, and then we eventually get to the arena, get to the battle royal, where he came out as a all-female battle royal, and he came out in a swimsuit with a big duck around him, and the booze, and it just got funnier and funnier.
Lawler comes into the company. Now, he's a guy who has publicly said during the territory raids he would never work for WWE or Vince McMahon. Just another guy hopping on the train, seeing where it's going, and...
No, I've always sensed that Jerry had some kind of relationship with Vince years and years before, maybe back with all that stuff that happened with that comedian in New York. Or he seemed to have some kind of tie with Vince, a relationship that connected him before Vince became the genius and There was some, and there's always, I think, been a sense of loyalty there too. And there's something with, and only Jerry and Vince would tell you what that is, but there seems to be a close working relationship. And even then, like I can remember Vince said, we need you to go work in Memphis. And I said, well, I thought you said we couldn't work outside WWE. He goes, well, you can't. And I said, well, you wouldn't let me work for my dad. Now you're telling me you want me to go work for some guy in Memphis, but I can't work for my dad. I said, it doesn't make any sense. I said, on that principle, I don't really feel like working for, I don't want to go down to Memphis on my one day off, and I got better things to do. I don't mind working for, I'm a WWE guy, I'm not a Memphis guy.
And where is this in your tenure? Like
right around
here?
this time,
Okay.
right around then, or maybe 94. But anyway, he said, no, you have to go. And I was like, I didn't want to go. And he said, you have to go. I need you to go. And so I did. I went, and but he had enough power. Clearly, it was important that I had to go. And I remember I brought it up to him that he wouldn't let me work for my dad, but he'd let me work for some other promoter. It's not fair, you know. It's not,
To which he says what?
I don't think he had an answer for it.
Does Jerry have his crown shit in right away, or does it take some time to get to that level?
No, it happened pretty fast.
Okay.
I think I know it was the town for sure. It was I think it was just a TV taping though. I want to say I thought it was the Rumble, but I don't think so. It was a TV taping, and it was in Sacramento for sure. And I didn't see who did it or anything. I just remember, like, when I went to the showers, it was right there on the floor. It was his crown filled up with, I don't know, I'm guessing that a Great Dane maybe, and you know, maybe a bull mastiff and maybe some horses. It was an awful concoction of shit in that crown.
Yeah.
And
maybe more than one individual.
oh,
you were saying.
definitely more than one,
Okay.
and proudly more than one, I think. I'm not sure which ones were involved in it, but I think it had something to do with Lawler playing videos or playing matches of guys that did jobs in his territory all the time. Like he beat Hogan. I think he got Hogan to put him over in one town or one match or something, like in Memphis or something like that, just before he made it big. And he would play it all the time. Oh. And that's an example of it. I know Hogan didn't like it, was pissed off at him before I ever met him. A lot of guys wanted to, like Kurt Hennig was another guy that said, once he got the push in WWE, or WWF was IC champ and all that, and all of a sudden Lawler was playing all the old footage of Kurt putting him over in Memphis all the time, and that pissed. And I think the payoffs. I remember Kurt saying something, he wasn't happy with his payoffs, that Lawler would never pay him very good. And so I remember, like, never knowing Jerry and not knowing much about what it was like to work in Memphis, but he had a lot of heat with a lot of guys. And
A lot of suspects.
I just remember Jerry looking around all night for his crown. I knew exactly where it was. I said, I didn't want to say, like, well, it's right around the corner in the shower, you know, but I just kept saying, I don't know where it is, Jerry. And he was starting to panic a little bit, and then he found it. And I think he was mortified, and rightfully so. But anyway, I guess they got it out of their system anyway. That was the end of it. It only happened one time.
No pun intended.
I was right there. I might have been one of the best witnesses to the whole thing.
Okay, good. So, go ahead.
I was right outside the door. I didn't see it happen, but I could hear all of it. And he was shrieking. That's the one thing I remember, was the Nails was shrieking in a high-pitched, a really high-pitched, shrill shriek of anger. Clearly a guy on the other side of the door was losing it, and losing it badly. But I had no idea.
But saying what?
That he'd been lied to, and he had enough of the bullshit and the lies and whatever it was. This was, like I say, it was very high, shrieking like almost like an hysterical woman. And then you heard a big bang, and then kind of a gurgling sound. And I can remember thinking, you know, shit, like, what do you do? You know, because Vince had a lot of heat with lots of guys over a long period of time. With everyone had questions, you know, and I think sometimes it's like, you know, it's hard to make every wrestler happy or make all their dreams come true, because they always, you know, if all of them had the chance, they'd all be champion kind of thing. You got to make a lot of promises that you can't fulfill, I think, and that's just part of the job. I don't know that it's necessarily being lied to. It's just sort of being vague and, you know, kind of see how it goes all the time. And it builds, and wrestlers start to get paranoid, and then, of course, they do lie to you about stuff, lots of stuff. And he went off, and I just remember Lanza grabbed. I sensed. I think I was just getting ready to open the door, and then I went, I'm gonna come back in a few minutes. And then Lanza, I think it was Jack Lanza, either was the first guy in, or I remember him like yelling and waving me in to come help, you know, pull nails off. And Slaughter might have been there, and a few other agents, but by the time I kind of got to the door, he was already sort of being hauled off, and he backed right up, let go, and walked out and phoned the police and said that Vince tried to molest him or something.
Yes.
And then they did. The police showed up, and there was a big, you know, and they charged him, I think, and Nails went home. And it was very unsettling. Vince was, I believe, choked really hard. I think it wasn't just like a, you know, like this kind of thing. It was like he was going for it. Yeah. Yeah. I think if they hadn't come in the room, who knows what would happen.
Firstly, you remember working with Simon Cowell.
Yeah, I do remember.
Was he as curmudgeon-y?
No, he was actually really good with me, as I remember. And I remember I told him, I said, I can't sing. I said, well, can't I just talk the, you know, I said, I think it'll sound better. I said, I'll do like Telly Savalas on that. You know, I'll sing like, I'll just talk through the song. And he goes, well, just try to sing it for me first. I said, trust me. And he goes, no, just try. So I sang it for him. And as soon as I finished singing it for him, he said, okay, let's try your way.
Let's do the William Shatner talk through the song.
Yeah, and it worked, at least for me anyway.
You going to do any more singing anytime soon?
No, I don't think so, especially not tonight.
That was the most significant year in your career?
It was the best year. I'd say 97 was maybe my most significant year, but it's hard to say it was my best year, even though that was my best year. 97, I did my best matches and delivered my greatest performances, if that's what you want to call them, I think. 92 was pretty good, though. I mean, I pulled the sword out of the stone, I think, and I was trying really hard to be a good champion and be a good leader for the wrestlers in the dressing room. And you know, I know when I left the day I left the company, I felt that I still had a lot of wrestlers, and I still know a lot of the guys that worked back then that worked with me or through those years that still are more respect for me for how I conducted myself than what they actually did with me in the ring.
Thank you for taking us back.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you for watching.
I was contacted by them. They wanted to do a show. They bought that show.
Oh.
God, amazing. Imagine, you know, you're going to have a profit ahead of time. Like, here's what we have to spend. Really? I don't have to worry about how many people come in. I get this amount. All right, so all I have to do is spend less than this amount and I make money. Ah, what a novel concept. So I knew what I was getting paid for the show, and I knew what my budget was, so I wanted to bring another name in. So Davey was, I don't know where he was passing, going to be in the area, whatever it was going to be. So we got Davey to do the show with us, yeah.
We're in December now, so we're at the end of the year. We're about to go into '93, which is going to be a huge transition year for this company.
To say the least.
Are you anticipating big things in '93 at this point? Can you
Not
see
that
the
big.
Future a little bit?
What I'm seeing is the future. So I'm trying to grow a company now to make it a new Memphis area territory. I'm thinking in my mind, this is going to be the new Memphis. On Saturdays, everyone's going to come to the TV studio, you know, where we do it at, and it's going to be just like that. The old NWA shows were, you know, in the studio there, where people were like wild and loud, but there was hardly anybody there. It didn't matter because it was, you know,
Right.
the only one to do was give them a good TV show. And that was my thought process then, that I was going to do something that's going to be in the tri-state area, basically, and try to make it something that, you know, would be, we could go eventually to state to state. That was the big grand concept.